It's up to you guys.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll just use this. Yeah,
Right.
these girl guides came to the door and dropped off and sold us some chocolate covered almonds. So I can't have, even if it's
Ooh.
decaf, I gotta have some
You need
coffee with
coffee
my
with
chocolate covered
almonds.
almonds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I poured
Totally.
it and I brought it downstairs. And now I can't find it anywhere.
Where's that damn coffee?
Well, because chocolate, is very, very sweet. So you mix it with coffee, and it's just you get the best of all the worlds.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing to do. I'm a black coffee drinker, so anytime you
Mm.
get something like sweet or creamy or whatever, you
Yeah.
eat a bit of that, and then that just colors the coffee flavor in your mouth for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it.
Black coffee. Oh, you probably can't hear me because I'm upstairs, but
I can hear. These mics
Yeah,
are pretty good.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, black coffee and sweets are the way to go.
Yeah.
Should we put this? Should we do an like a video episode too?
I was thinking it would make sense. I figured you would float that out there, and I was thinking what I would answer, and I'm like, yeah, why not?
As long as we do it live, because if we have to make any edits to the audio, then it gets tricky trying to align the video to the audio. It's like you have to edit it twice. So, I mean, with the last few episodes we've done, we had no edits, so we'll see.
Yeah, we're getting better at this thing, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the only audio edit we had to do when we interviewed Garson was, I remember at one point I thought that there was a chance that his mic wasn't like being recorded, so I had to
great.
Wait, we can hear him, right? Because he's the whole show. Imagine interviewing the guy and then, can you say everything again?
His answer was the best though. He just said, "Well, if not, you heard it."
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, yeah.
I mean, you guys are two fans.
If a tree falls in the forest, if Mike Garson falls in the forest, then
and that's definitely that episode was definitely more of that than for like the listeners. I definitely thought like, wow, like this is cool for us. Not that we didn't produce a good episode or anything that people would care to hear, but I just felt like that was more like us and him.
Yeah.
And, that was pretty cool.
Well, what I was going to say is that in my journalistic days, I did manage to interview Canadian celebrity Spencer Rice from Kenny versus
Kenny and
Spenny.
Spenny, oh yeah.
Yeah, cool. And similar sort of thing. It's like, I'm just happy to have done it. Like, I don't need to put it out and like, but it's a feather in my cap. It's more for me than anything else.
Yeah. All right, I guess we should just get started then, shouldn't we?
Sure.
We'll leave that all in. Why not? The banter probably went over well last episode. Yeah, welcome back to Fantastic Voyage, the once again David Bowie podcast. I don't know, Miles, I don't know if you've heard or been following or not, but Johnny's been bugging me. I've been calling it the David Bowie podcast.
I've noticed. Yeah.
We are one of a few David Bowie podcasts, but I've just been saying it just rolls off the tongue for some reason.
But possibly the only one that really talks about this album, because I know there's a few out there, but we're kind of going into that end of his career that people like to avoid, which is a shame because this is a pretty great record. But
yeah, so joining us today, I'm Jesse, by the way.
I'm John.
Joining us today, we've got our cousin Miles Malloy. Welcome to the show, Miles. How are you doing?
Hey gang, doing well, thank you. How are you guys?
We're good. So let's get into it. Yeah. Buddha of Suburbia, we penciled you in, Miles, like right away. And the reason being is I remember, this must have been like well before we started the show, maybe like 5 years ago, maybe more. We often exchange lists of like, okay, top 10 this, top 10 that, or whatever. And it was like, okay, let's try to make a top 10 Bowie songs list or whatever. And you texted me and there were a couple from this album on it. And so that remained in my head.
If I remember correctly, there were two that I kind of kept juggling back and forth between, which we'll get into once we reach those tracks. But yes, there are some tracks on here that I really like. And it's a shame because, as aforementioned, it's a bit of a hidden gem. Like nobody knows about Buddha of Suburbia.
And one that you can tell Bowie was quite conscious of being a gem because he would reference this, as I heard he in an interview called this his favorite album, which and who knows, maybe that was truthful, but I think that obviously comes in with the, the idea that nobody really knows about it. He's kind of like, go and play that one. Like
right.
He could have said Ziggy or Aladdin Sane or something, and maybe that is his favorite. Who knows, or that was his favorite. But yeah, obviously this is one that I think he really wanted people to go and check out, because out of all his hidden gem albums, I think this was his favorite. That would make sense.
Yeah. That's why it blew me away when you picked a couple songs from it, because it was like, okay, even I have clearly looked past this one. I've put this near the bottom of my list before, but not because I didn't like it, it's because I'm just not, I didn't know it as much as I knew the other ones. It's something that I think could be said for a lot of Bowie fans or a lot of music fans in general, because it was originally, so it started as a project to create a score for this show, the Buddha of Suburbia. And it aired on the BBC, I think in 93. I'm not sure exactly when it aired, but the project started as a soundtrack, and it turned into this other musical project that Bowie put out, where he changed some of that score. I think the title song is the only thing that actually is intact on the actual TV show. But the rest of it evolved into what is really a studio album. And it was referred to as a studio album by Bowie, but it wasn't marketed as such. It was actually released in the UK as just a soundtrack album, and it was totally overlooked. It didn't have Bowie on the cover. I'm sure people are familiar with that hideous, well, it's not hideous, but it's not Bowie. It doesn't look like a David Bowie album. Like David Bowie is not, you can't really see it on the cover anywhere. It wasn't hyped with Best and Scary Monsters or anything like that. So it's kind of a hidden gem in his catalog.
And also worth mentioning too, I guess, that it was also overlooked because of that. What was that compilation that came out? The singles collection, the same year, the same week, a week later or something. So
rough.
Yeah, so he's not on the cover, and it's for this TV soundtrack. It's being called like television score. I even noticed on the Rate Your Music page, this was called like television score. The album was the genre. I'm like, this isn't a television score album.
Yeah, depending on who you ask or talk to, or what you refer to, it is either referred to as a soundtrack or a studio album or both. Mm-hmm. Like I know we'll get into the album cover a little bit later, but at least the original one does, I believe, call it a soundtrack. And
right.
Funny enough, because it's like one song that was used for the TV show, but oh well.
Yeah, and it was only released in the UK. It wasn't even released in America until 1995, until October 95. So after Outside, this wasn't released in America. It was hard to find. Just released in the UK. Went to number 87, so really, really low on the charts. 87, as where, Johnny, you mentioned the singles collection went top 10 at the same time. So a bit easier to sell Space Oddity than it is
UK
Sex
Fish Air.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just give some background, because I guess this is kind of touching on what we were addressing, where it's a hidden gem. And for me, I discovered it because I found this album not in North America nor Europe, but actually I was traveling to Japan, and I found it in, I believe it was in Tokyo at Tower Records on whatever it was, the 7th floor or something like that.
Oh, that's cool.
One of the highlights of my trip. And it was just like one of the albums I found there that I got, and I was not familiar with it at all, which made it, enticing, especially. And that was right about at the tail end of me actually buying a lot of physical media, like CDs, like music wise. I might get back into records now because I've acquired a record player, but it's one of those things that I think is lost on today's youth a little bit. Is back in the day, like I would go to HMV, or it's been long enough now that I can't even, Mother's Music, and I would buy CDs, and it'd be like whatever's available is kind of what is at your disposal, or what you get, right? So it's always like luck of the draw, and that kind of informs what you listen to and what you like in a weird way. Like fate kind of informs it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, and by owning it, you stuck with it probably more than if it was just another stream, or in my case, it was, I added every single Bowie album to one huge MP3 CD back when they started. I remember you could start adding like 120 to 200 songs to a CD or something like that.
So discs,
yeah. So it wasn't a commitment to the album, because it was like, oh, okay, I'll skip to Outside, which clicked right away. As where, I mean, spoiler alert, but this one grew on me quite a bit. Over the last couple of weeks, I wasn't expecting quite the jump. Similar to Black Tie White Noise, actually.
Yeah, well, this was a huge grower for me too. And interestingly enough, we're talking about physical media, and I kind of think of myself as a big, big fan of physical media, but I do, yeah, I got a huge collection. But this is the first album that we've covered so far that I actually don't own the physical copy of. But what really enhanced the listening experience of this album for me, what really kind of pushed it up my rankings, was I went for a walk last night just in Kildonan Park here in Winnipeg. And, I just taken this beautiful fall walk, and I had my headphones on, and it was like the most amazing experience. I mean, and I guess I was raking outside earlier in the week, and I thought, this would be a perfect, it sounded like a fall album to me.
It's very fall. Yeah.
And then sure enough, I actually just an hour ago, I decided, maybe I'll watch the music video for the title track. And that's what Bowie's doing in the video too, right? He's kind of walking through
Suburbia.
Kind of he's walking through Suburbia, and he's walking through the leaves, and I went, oh yeah, that was exactly what this album was made for. So yeah, that was my experience. I do plan on owning this album. Like, I need this album. I don't know, Jesse, for Christmas something. I need this album bad. Like, I want to play it over and over again.
And there were a couple songs on this album that like previous to my reappraisal over the last little while that I absolutely adored, and in particular ones that I thought you might like, just based on your tastes in music. I remember when they were all re-released, it was only available on vinyl for the first time since the initial release, I think, like when this new Brilliant Adventures box set, whatever number it was, 5, came out. I remember you saying, I don't think I'll get Buddha. I'll probably get Earthling and Outside. I was like, I don't know. When we get to Buddha, I think there's a couple for sure that are going to stick with you. I should mark them down here so that I could play the guessing game as to what I think your favorite tracks are going to be.
Well, I mean, if my love for Moss Garden was any indication.
Right.
Yeah. I guess that one too. I was going to say, Johnny's going to like this one.
Yeah.
Speaking of that video, that was pretty much it for promotion. So if calling it a soundtrack album and not releasing it in the Western world wasn't, well, in North America anyway, wasn't enough to slow it down. No tour once again, and very little promotion. I think it only got one review, a good one. Bowie likes to mention. He kept saying it was reviewed once, but it was a good review. And there was the one music video, and that was it. Should we get to the track? Is there anything else we need to mention before we jump into the title track, Buddha of Suburbia?
I guess maybe I'll just throw it out there as we're about to start that I think that this album does suffer from a very strange track order.
Yes,
so I think it doesn't do it a lot of favors, even though the songs are all individually quite good. So, sorry, spoilers on my opinion, but let's begin with the first one, which it works as an opener.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that, because I wrote down on this song, is the genre of this opening track too soft rock for what's to come? Like, I feel like if you're just skimming through it and you listen to this, you're going to be like, oh, Bowie's doing kind of this. Like, if you listen to it once, you're going to go, okay, this is familiar sounding enough. Definitely in contrast to like Sex and the Church or UK Ian Fish, I wonder if people didn't get to track number 2 to really see what this album had to offer.
Well, and to our point earlier, especially during the streaming age, right? Okay, let's check out Buddha of Suburbia. You played,
right.
You played for a minute. Oh, that's what this album's all about. Okay, whatever. Next. That's probably honestly what I did when I downloaded Bowie's discography some 15 years ago. I, probably played this and then, and just went to, the next thing. But God, I was missing out because, like you said, this title track doesn't necessarily represent what's on this album. There's, all kinds of stuff on this album, all kinds of different sound palettes.
I also don't want to come across as beating up on this title track either, because it's quite it's a serviceable single, that's for sure, even by Bowie standards, isn't it?
Well, I do think, at least thematically, it maybe holds the album somewhat intact, because I think like this song may as well have just been called like David Bowie a retrospective. This is kind of like, this is almost like a soundtrack sounding song. It's like almost like a soundtrack to like a documentary of his life or something, and it's his most self-referential song to date, right? I mean, Loving Life and All It Has to Give, English Man Going Insane. I think Bowie's work had always been self-referential, but it was always in more of like this metaphoric sense. But this is just like straight up meta. This is him talking about himself, and he's kind of, there's all sorts of Easter eggs scattered across this song, you know, of his past work. Like there's the Zane, Zane, Zane refrain from what's that, from All the Madmen.
Yeah.
And there's a couple others too. There's
Space Oddity riff, yeah,
near the end, which is like my favorite part of Space Oddity. The doon 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 doon. So I kind of think it does at least fit this concept of Bowie going like this album to me is like a retrospective of his life, or his life up until this point and what's to come. I think he's very much in that headspace. So at least thematically, I think this song does kind of fit sort of the Buddha of Suburbia identity.
Yeah, this is a song that I consider to be one of the few, like, I don't know how to put it better, but like real songs on the album. Like there's quite a few instrumentals, and even then a lot of the tracks aren't instrumental per se, but it kind of gives that vibe there because they're quite experimental. So the way I always saw this song on the album is that it's like at the very least it's a good way to crack things and start things, because it's funny kind of the notion of people listening to this song and then kind of skipping the entire album. For me, when I first heard this album, I liked this song and then went to the next few tracks, and that's when I started skipping. I was like, oh my god, what is this, but this song I really liked. I noted at the very least the Space Oddity kind of musical motif that's in there, and like that I think it's quite epic in a way. Like it's a pretty epic kind of rousing, you know, chorus or refrain, and so I dig it a lot, I'd say.
Yeah, so there's actually, we didn't get into the personnel earlier. It's really Erdal Kizilki, I think I've heard Bowie pronounce it that way. It's him and Bowie in a studio over a couple of days in Montreux, Switzerland, putting this together. It was really done really fast, and apparently Bowie was extremely happy while creating it. I think Montreux was his happy place, and they shipped the tracks off to David Richards, or I think, well, no, Bowie would have been with it too, but David Richards, coming back from Never Let Me Down, did the mixing. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but I thought we should throw in the musicians, because I mean, oh right, I know where I was going with that. So this is one of the few tracks on the album that actually has more musicians on it. This band 3D Echo, which is a British funk rock band who I kind of want to get into and listen to, because the two tracks that they're on are good. It's this and Bleed Like a Craze. There's more musicians on this track than the rest of them, which is just Erdal and Bowie kind of, you know, fiddling around with fucking with the fabric of time, as Visconti would have called it, especially with some of the UK fish.
And you mentioned that he was in a good headspace when he made this. I mean, that the part of the song that sticks out to me the most is Loving Life and All It Has to Give. You know, Bowie, we just watched Moon Age Daydream recently, that documentary, whatever you want to call it, and that seemed to be like the central idea of the movie, is David Bowie was this guy who loved life. And I think this song really is that, like, that's the thing to kind of maybe hang your hat on, is like, this song's about appreciating life. And, you know, when I went through that walk in the woods yesterday, you know, a lot of the times you want to enhance your musical experience by, you know, going to a concert or, you know, smoking weed or something, and oh, that's going to make the music sound so good. But, you know, this time it was like, I just went outside and was like just appreciating the trees and nature and the air, you know, and just listening to this album in headphones and hearing him sing that, you know, loving life and all it has to give, you know, I thought that was, you could kind of tell that Bowie was in a good headspace. And I think it really shows in a lot of these tracks, and this one in particular. Obviously, he literally says that on this track.
Yeah. That's my favorite part of the song too, like the bridge or the chorus, that part where it changes is just classic Bowie. You know, we talked about Life on Mars, how things just take a dark turn every once in a while, or it sounds different structurally than maybe you're used to hearing, and I feel like there's a kind of a left turn on this track where it's like, oh, like it hits that, or he's going there with this chord progression, and it just like, it's one of those ones where it hits you in the chest. You're like, yeah, I want to hear it again and again. I mean, we could splice it in, but or we can just go in one go and not splice it in. Maybe we'll do that. Although, Johnny, I noticed your mic is doing that thing when you talk loud. Maybe fiddle
let's fiddle this chord
thing
here
around a bit. Yeah.
No cough right now.
Test. How are we now? You said when I talk loud.
It sounds fine to me.
Okay. Good now, I think.
Yeah.
I'll talk really close into it. Okay.
I don't no, it's still doing it. So maybe try it again. I'll be right back too. Give me 1 sec. We'll have to do it.
These stupid chords.
Oh, the pressure's off. There's going to be a cut.
Yeah. Trying to find a nice space for it to rest. Okay, that should be good, I hope.
Nice. Well, yeah, let's crack a lacking with you.
Not too much. Just honestly really tired, I think, because I was at a Wu-Tang concert on Wednesday night. Tuesday night. And so, I was obviously up super late for that. And then there was, the first Jets game of the year. They played in Calgary, actually. So that game was on super late because, our time's different. So I've just been just tired. Today I was almost felt like going to bed when I came home from work. But no, I'm doing good, though. Feeling better now that we're actually doing this. The Wu-Tang concert was really, really good.
Sweet.
It was almost like a movie. It was like act one, like Nas was with them too. And it was like act 1, act 2, act 3, all kinds of cool visuals in the background and different sets, different people on at different times. Just almost like a really big collage, like a movie collage kind of a performance. So that was really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's like an artist I've heard of, but I don't know if I would know a song. So
I'm back. Yeah. I don't know if you guys were...
You're gone for 20 seconds and it's turned into the Wu-Tang Clan podcast.
Oh,
I'm a Wu-Tang fan.
Let's just leave it in. Who cares?
Yeah, so John, I was just happy the pressure was off. Oh boy, there we go.
It's been tricky for me doing these last couple of episodes because I went to a 50 Cent concert, then the next day we're doing Black Tie White Noise, and now I'm at a Wu-Tang and Nas concert. Now we're doing Buddha of Suburbia, and my mind's just kind of scrambled. What are we talking about again? Fourth Chamber, Liquid. Oh no, Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to fuck with. No, we're talking about South Horizon.
Yeah.
Well, unless you gave away like your passwords to your Gmail or something, is it okay to leave it in? Or
I think so. It might be a little some of it might be boring, but
it's a real slice of life.
Yeah.
I think the first little bit we were taking this serious and we were doing edits and we were making sure, and now it's just like fuck it. If people are listening still at this point, they'll listen to me attending to my kids and my dog and stuff.
Well, and it's like you were saying earlier too, where it's like this is a weird enough album that like when you're putting out a podcast, like there's going to be just less interest by virtue of it being Buddha of Suburbia and not like
right.
You Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah. For my Rush podcast, which I'm going to promote right now, I thought very similarly. Well, yeah, I have a podcast that I do with a friend called Anthems, a Rush podcast, or a podcast about Rush, a Rush podcast, one of those.
Rush podcast.
It's the Rush podcast.
We debated it. No, I wouldn't dare to proclaim such a thing. And so we're definitely into the weeds now of like some of their weirder, whatever late 80s, early 90s albums where there's not a huge fan base necessarily. So it just kind of feels like we're in the classroom and the teachers are gone, or like the parents are out of town or whatever, or out for dinner, and we're just like running around on our own. Like,
that's a perfect way to put it. I totally get that.
If you're listening, great.
Yeah, it's a comic book guy is listening right now. That's about it.
Yeah.
All right. So where were we?
I guess Sex in the Church.
Interesting. They leave out the Buddha of Suburbia, which is in the title of the album, but the song is just Buddha of Suburbia. So it's not the Buddha of Suburbia podcast. It's just Buddha of Suburbia.
It's Buddha of Suburbia. Oh, yeah, huh? The album cover art says the Buddha of Suburbia. On Spotify, the album's coming up as Buddha of Suburbia. Yeah.
Right. And this Yeah, there's no the on the track listing for YouTube listeners
the
out there.
right.
I'm holding it up. Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, should we move on to something, and now for something completely different? Sex in the Church.
Let's dance.
Yeah. What a great use of words in a title for a song. Like two words that are, when put together in the same sentence, just, speak to controversy and taboo and shame. Sex in the Church. Like this
Very
one,
much so.
the title drew me in the first time I saw the track listing. I was like, okay, gotta check this one out.
This is an album with a lot of great song names, this being one of them for sure. Instantly evocative.
Yeah.
Whereas some of them are much more or less opaque, I guess.
Well, and yeah, the songs kind of, I guess, sparse vocally, right? Like I think there's a lot of space in the song, and I think that just kind of allows the brain to just go wherever it wants, and you can kind of just fill in a lot of the songs in this album, to be quite frank. But I think with this type of song, like you said, Jesse, like the title, just "Sex in the Church," you can kind of just fill in the blanks with your own experiences or your thoughts on those words, right? Like there's no real like linear story necessarily going on with the words, even though there are verses. I like, for me, I was just reminded, I guess, because Sinead O'Connor just recently passed away. I thought about her whole thing when she was on SNL, and you just kind of think about all the things you've heard over the years about sex in the church, the Catholic Church and all that type of shit. So yeah, that's kind of where my brain goes when I listen to this song, and I think that's kind of a strong point of this album. Is Bowie usually had these very clear lyrical narratives, but on this album he kind of doesn't. But yet you're still able to kind of have these pictures painted in your head, these very specific ideas still pop up in your brain, despite him not necessarily leading you in any direction. He kind of just lets you pick the direction you want to go with it.
Yeah, the vocals for this are more of a sound, or it adds to the soundscape as opposed to the lyrics having content that, like you said, the idea and where your mind goes is maybe the intent of behind this song. Like you fill in the blanks. Bowie famously said, whatever, when you show me the monster in a movie, I'm not going to be as scared as what I can think of. Whatever my imagination can think up, that's what is going to scare me in a horror movie, is not seeing the monster. That's kind of like this, not hearing exactly what he has to say. It's like, yeah, you figure it out.
Funny you should mention that, because I just watched Alien a night or two ago, and
that shows you the monster.
You do see it, but not for like the first half of the movie or so.
Right.
You kind of see like parts of it, but not the full thing, like shadows of it and stuff like that. And then you eventually see it. But yeah,
well, once you see it, you start getting plush toys at Toys R Us of it, and it cheapens it and stuff. It's like you're not scared of the alien anymore because you've seen it in comics and you've seen it, memed and stuff like that, and it's not as scary as whatever you can imagine. And I mean, speaking to the lyrics too, Bowie said that most of these lyrics, he just picked words that sounded cool, so they don't necessarily have much meaning. It's just, I mean, there's one song in particular where he just says nonsense throughout. We'll get to that one later, but it sounds great because it just sounds cool. I don't know what the hell he's saying or what he means.
That's like John Frusciante describing Stadium Arcadium by the Red Hot Chili Peppers as an expression that he found to be beautiful, but if meaningless, like I am the walrus or something like that, right? Like it's just like, yeah, it's right. pretty words, like it, and that's all it has to be.
I was waiting for our first Chili Peppers reference.
And the Beatles. Miles filled the quota before we had to.
Oh, sorry.
Nice. Yeah,
we are related.
Yeah, Miles is just as into the Chili Peppers as I, if not more. I don't know. We just went down to we went to see them a few months ago. I think we may have mentioned that on the podcast, but we saw our hero right there.
Also, for the listeners, enjoy trying to decipher the three of us because we all sound like borderline identical, right? So.
Well, for the YouTube listeners, like me and Miles kind of have the same look going on. Actually, Miles was in town recently, and there was pictures taken of us, and we were wearing the same color shirt there at one point. You had an olive shirt, so I threw an olive colored shirt on, and yeah, we looked like identical twins. We actually looked more like brothers than probably Jesse and I.
Yeah, I
same
look
color
like
hair.
I look like our dad, and Johnny looks like our mom. And somehow, even though our dads are brothers, Miles looks like Johnny. So
yeah. they both married blonde women.
I don't know.
Blonde women with similar features, or something,
or something sinister. Sex in the Church. Back to
Sex in the
that.
Church.
Notice the there's almost like a church organ that kind of pops up in the middle of it. I thought that's definitely an Easter egg. I don't think it's an actual pipe organ or anything. It's probably Erdal just playing an electric organ or something, but it had kind of churchy feels to it, and it wasn't anywhere else on the album.
There are lots of things that pop in and out, right? I think that's because when I was reading about this book, or reading books about this album, apparently like Bowie would kind of have these pieces of music, these reference points, like he'd find out what key the song was in, and then he'd just kind of start adding overdubs with just the percussion in the background. And then eventually he would turn the knobs back up on all the separate tracks, and you'd kind of hear all these things clashing against each other that they were in the same key, but he couldn't hear all those individual instruments at the same time. He just heard the beat. So when he turned them all up, he'd go, okay, we'll use some of this, maybe turn that down, turn this. And I guess throughout a lot of the songs, and I guess this is one of them, you kind of get these parts that just come in and out. And it's a very sporadic kind of sounding album. And it's really cool because he's never really done that before. I don't know if anyone's ever really done that before on an album. So very unique in that sense.
It gives the album a style for sure. And that was something that resonated with me when I was listening to it for the first time, whatever it was, 10 years ago, because I was getting more familiar with digital audio workstations myself, like GarageBand, your Logics, blah, blah, blah. And it was pretty apparent just from listening, you can hear things dropping out, right? Like I read the similar thing, John, where he did use some sort of a technique like that, where he would fade things in and out, and there'd be interesting, sound collages you'd get out of those experiments. But either way, that kind of like almost rough around the edges kind of feel to it was inspiring to me in some way, because it's like, oh, it does sound in some ways like this was put together in 6 days by like 2 guys, but like that's cool, and like they actually achieved something really great with it too. Like David Bowie's somebody who doesn't shy away from like mistakes and like things that are rough around the edges, so it's like pretty par of the course in that respect.
Oblique strategies again, kind of. I mean, you can kind of see why Eno gets back into the mix shortly after this, right?
Yeah, totally.
That like that whole experiment he's doing, it's like playing music blind, right? Like, okay, here's the percussion, and we're just gonna do a bunch of things over it, and then play it all together and see how it sounds, and figure out what we like and what we don't like, and just a very cool experiment.
This album's almost a job interview for getting Eno back on track. Like, hey, here's what I'm into. Care to join me for my next venture? And he's like, yeah, I would like to. I think he did hear this and say something like that. I can't totally take that idea. But yeah, notice the drums towards the end kind of build up similar to Suffragette City. So another kind of motif heading back to the old days. There's
or was that? I think I saw Gene Genie get mentioned a lot too.
Okay, I thought Suffragette City just with like the Suffragette.
I think it's the same part because does Gene Genie end similarly? I gotta.
Yeah, they both do. Yeah. When we jam that, we usually do Suffragette City the long way, and Gene Genie we don't. So I thought of that first, but yeah, it's similar. This would be a tumble and twirl choice nominee for me at least. But you know what? We did Pallas Athena last time, and that kind of is the other. They both sit very similarly in his palette.
Well, funny you should mention that too, because remember when we tackled that song, I kind of mentioned how I thought Pallas Athena, it started innocent enough, but then it kind of started to take on a sinister undertone as the song went on. Like God is on top of it all. That's all you really hear throughout the song. And then it sounds reassuring at the start, but then by the time you get to the end of the song, it sounds worrisome. God is on top of it all. Like, is that a good thing? Is it a bad? Start to sound like a bad thing. And what's this song called? Sex in the Church. Right? So
yeah.
God is on top of it all, the church, God. There's also somehow lyrical parallels between this and Pallas Athena as well, which I didn't see coming, but I somehow was able to kind of piece that together. So yeah, I thought that was interesting too. You always see Pallas Athena get brought up too whenever you read about the song. It's actually all the books ever kind of say Pallas Athena Part 2.
There isn't much to go off of if you read the books. Like there's like 3 or 4 sentences on each song when it comes, or they're not even covered at all. So I kind of like that though, because I find when you're reading books about stuff, they kind of put ideas in your head and they tell you to look for things. I like looking for it myself.
Yeah.
Or coming up with, not going into it knowing whether this is a critically acclaimed song or not. But yeah, this one.
It's better
It's
to play
good.
the album a few times first and then go and check. And just in case it's more, it should be a tool to figure out something about a song that you maybe missed, and then you can then like it, right?
Right.
Rather than
Yeah.
have almost like seeing a bad movie review before you watch a movie, and then it's tainted before you even watch it. But if you've seen it and you didn't like it, then you read a good review, and that can kind of prop it back up for you.
All right, should we move it along?
Let's do it.
South Horizon is the next track, and the first of back-to-back instrumentals. Although it's funny because Sex in the Church I always kind of consider an instrumental, but
might as well be.
It may as well be, yeah. So the second instrumental, arguably, yeah. This one can be, I guess, broken up into two parts. There's kind of the really jazzy part, and then the funky part, or whatever you want to call it, midway through. Although it kind of blends back into jazz, though. It doesn't just totally change. It just there's, like you guys were saying, it's just things kind of come in and then fade back out, and other things fade back in. It's not like there's especially with, the drums kind of riding on the cymbal, and the Garson's back on this one. This is one of the ones that Garson plays on, and there's some sax, maybe even Kazilke on trumpet on this song too, I think. I think there's two horns on two different types. And then that about halfway through, or not quite. I presume David Richards comes in with some, because he was doing drum machines on it. And that's where the funky groove kind of comes in, but it doesn't stick like that, does it? It kind of fades back into more jazz and more Garson playing, and really cool song. A lot going on.
Yeah, it's kind of nightmarish in that way, where there's definitely some fader work going on there, and the fact that it is just these soundscapes flowing in and out, it's makes for a pretty remarkable effect. And this was one that, as I mentioned before, first listening to this album, this one was also a pretty tough nut to crack for me. But now I like jazz music. I listen to artists like Björk. I like to dance. So it's like, to me, this is like a really fucking awesome song, but not what you would expect from David Bowie at all necessarily. Which brings up the question, what do you expect from David Bowie? He's somebody who's always changing. So this album's pretty emblematic of like, here's an artist who's very hard to pin, and it's like, you can't say this isn't his style because he's always changing. So you know what? This is a David Bowie song.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like the key to this whole record, maybe like it seemed to be like spontaneity and trusting your first instinct and having like no second guessing. And what I found was really interesting is when it came down to getting Garson apparently came in and did this all in like 3 hours. Like Bowie played him the music, he improvised over it, and it's like, boom, done. Like now that's it. And I think that formula is very integral for Bowie at this stage in his career, and it can probably explain why his ideas became a critical success again, because anytime you listen to him in interviews, he always talked about how like his biggest mistakes were when he tried to second guess himself or to please an audience, right? And he thought that his work was at its strongest when he was maybe acting more selfishly and doing what he wanted to do. And if you read the Buddha liner notes, which I wasn't able to, but I found them online, he says, rarely now do we artists tell us much of ourselves. We were without history, interest, or spiritual life. Our thoughts are often scattered and banal. Those occasional strands that have some merit are often stunted, if not stillborn. Although I get the sense that all art is somewhat autobiographical, it seems increasingly hard for the artist to relinquish his solipsistic subjectivity. Now he kind of gets a little off topic there for what I'm trying to get at. But what I think is great for him here is he's kind of blocking the outside world, right? I think the beauty of that is now this is art that's being created with like few reference points. There's no audience in mind. There's no one to please in mind. There's nothing that you're trying to make it sound like. You're not trying to go back to the future. There's nothing here other than music that's being created for what you want in the moment. And I think that sound is captured. And it's a very organic and kind of retrospective view of his life. He's not thinking about anything. He's just going, okay, I'm not going back to anything. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not trying to please anybody. I'm just, here's where I'm at in my life. And he's kind of almost giving you an autobiographical piece of his life. And I think this is maybe his most like organic artistic statement to date. It seems very, very organic.
Yeah, it's interesting where. Oh, go ahead, Miles.
Well, I was going to say, I think friend of the pod, Mike Garson, said on your episode something along the lines of the fact that he'll listen to music and he has to hear something in his head that he wants to play, or else he won't play anything. And so I think that works well with the notion of, hey, we're giving you 3 hours in the studio to record some stuff, like just be inspired and put down whatever comes to you right away, which it sounds kind of like that's how he works, or it worked well in this situation. If you're into Mike Garson style, it's very Mike Garson sounding stuff on here, right? Like,
yeah, oh, absolutely.
Very chromatic.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing too, to not play until you're inspired. I mean, I'm no Mike level Garson Mike Garson level of musician or anything, but when I'm trying to figure out like what to play, I play until I figure it out, instead of just like I can't imagine being on that level where you're thinking about what you're going to play and then it just comes off of your fingertips. That's truly being one with your instrument, and that's how you're able to play something for David Bowie in 3 hours and come up with something after just hearing it and being like, okay, I'm going to do something. And it's not just like putting down a bass line or putting down a like guitar or something. Like, he's doing crazy shit on it. It's like, I don't know what else to call it.
Not exactly against like a 12-bar blues backdrop either, right? Like, this is quite the background he gave him to, okay, play over this, like this is another one of those songs, like we've been mentioning over and over again, where the shit dropping in and out, and it's kind of all over the place. Like, it's not an easy task either. Well, but like you said, to your point, Miles, it's in his wheelhouse though, because that is the type of guy that Garson is.
Right.
And on this song and Bleed Like a Craze, he takes over the song as far as I'm concerned. Like, I listen to Garson's playing, so he's in essence he's writing the music on the spot, like on top of it. Like, it's Mike is on top of it all. It's like he especially with Bleed Like a Craze, to be like, okay, can you do some overdubs, and then the song starts off with him. Like, how many overdub sessions you get the intro to a song out of? Usually that's constructed and you go, okay, you're going to add some, you're going to beef up the guitar tone, or you're going to add some backing vocals, or add a track with a bit of flourishes here and there, but not like, kind of put in the main part of the song, that at least the part that I listen to and enjoy. Yeah. We're still talking about South Horizon, right? I'm kind of thinking about Bleed Like a Craze. I'm thinking about Bleed Like a Craze as well, because the two Garson tracks are very Mikey, so to speak.
Indeed.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you guys want to say about?
Nothing really. Other than apparently this was Bowie's favorite track, and he called this his favorite album. So I guess this is Bowie's Tumble and Twirl pick. No, this is Bowie's best song of all time pick. His favorite song on his favorite album.
There we go.
Holy smokes. That's pretty good. It's definitely like of a time. Like, this was like relatively cutting edge music stylistically in that era, but I had to check the dates. I think this came out in 93, if that wasn't already brought up. But I had to check, and Björk's debut came out in 93 as well. And like, a lot of the soundscapes and the styles in this, like, I feel like, you could put Björk or David, like, you could swap the vocals for those albums and they would work. Like, I know there's photos of them. I don't know if they like interacted at this point, but anyway, a lot of like Björk vibes I'm getting from songs. That's like cool. This. Yeah.
Just to play Björk devil's advocate, didn't she technically have albums like 20 years before that when she was like a child star? I mean, obviously her debuts are debut. Have you ever listened to any of that stuff? Because I haven't. I'm curious though.
I haven't listened to that stuff. I like the Sugar Cubes, which is the band that she's in before her solo stuff really took off, but that's more, I don't know, Icelandic pop, new wave-ish. I haven't really heard her earlier stuff, but I'm aware that she's been a recorded artist since childhood. So yeah.
Because that randomly came up recently, because me and a few of my music pals online, we were kind of talking about like what's like the best album an artist made 15 years into their career. Like Radiohead in Rainbows comes to mind, and a bunch of these Bowie ones, for example. And then it was like, oh yeah, like if technically Björk's debut, like it's like, even though it's her first, right?
Yeah, which she dared to call debut.
All right, let's move on to the mysteries. So this is one, Johnny, that I thought of you.
Yeah.
For, Moss Garden feels. You know what this one kind of feels like to me? You know when like a like a company introduces something new and like corporate is really excited about it and they put together a video, like a slideshow. Like this is the music that they would put to that like new video, you know, here at Manitoba Group Life, we've always put your needs first. Join us as we embark on this journey with a rebrand or something, and I guess cringy, but
do you remember that scene in Entourage where Ari, who is the main character's agent, is trying to get him to come back to his agency, and he goes to all those meetings before going back to Ari, and they're like Microsoft, McDonald's, Vincent Chase, name brand recognition, like one of those meetings, right? And then he goes to Ari, and he's got the same slideshow that all the other companies had, and he gets pissed off at him. And
it's like an Apple keynote speech or something, like introducing, Apple will now piss for you, or your phone. Like, I don't know.
God damn, I've been waiting for that feature.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was talking about that Wu-Tang concert I was at. I had to go and pee, and I was really upset. If Apple could have done that for me, I would have been. I mean, I'm sure you have to sign your life away in order to get that, but in that moment, I really would have appreciated it.
When Miles and I went to see the Chili Peppers a couple of weeks in advance, I was like bladder training. I was like, I'm not going to pee when I have to, because we got pit tickets and we got pretty close, and I didn't want to lose that spot in line. It's like, I'm not going to pee in a bottle, and I'm in my mid-30s now. I'm not 16 anymore. It's not the same.
Fortunately, It was a pretty respectful, slightly maybe erring on the side of older or like, young, but not like wearing spiky leather jackets sort of crowd. So it was like, we could like find our way to the front pretty easy.
Yeah, we're relatively tall, you especially, so we could see, like, our sight line was good.
God, yeah. I was at a show the other week and it was seated, and I swear to God, the two tallest guys at the venue were sitting right in front of me. It's like, how does this happen? I don't care about the people behind me, but what about me?
Yeah, the mysteries is. Oh no, you have something else you wanna?
Well, I was gonna say I can maybe try to tie that into the song, because I think Buddha of Suburbia was kind of about this like curious suburban lad who wanted to break out of suburbia and get to the city, right? And things like concerts and what the city has to offer is kind of what he's missing and what he's maybe curious about. Maybe that's what the mystery, in the song is. So
yeah.
And I do think that's kind of what this song evokes. It's curiosity, it's possibilities, excitement, especially like when you're within the confines of one's predicament. So I think to maybe how it tied into the movie, maybe where this piece somehow tied into the movie was this kid kind of sitting in his room, just bored of the suburban lifestyle and kind of wanting to just branch out and go to see these new sights and excitement and see all of these other things that life has to offer.
Yeah, it's conveyed pretty well musically, I'd say, as an instrumental. There is kind of a longing to it. And I was going to say, it's one where even though there's not a lot happening harmonically necessarily, it is still weirdly moving, like some of these simpler kind of chord progressions. Like all it takes is one big chord change and like it tugs at my heartstrings authentically. Like if I was one of those people at the convention for this company or whatever, I'd be like, I'm like tearing up in the audience. I'm just like trying to hide it. Like, God damn it, it's happening. It's actually quite pretty.
Well, and there's a pretty little effect on the piano, right? Like the notes are being played, like they're not exactly backwards, but there was some kind of treatment done to them.
Yeah.
You can kind of hear the note being played before you hear the piano key being hit, if that makes sense.
Like that could have been some post.
Yeah.
And then the note gets hit. So I don't know what they did, because it's not being played backwards, but it's like the build up to the note is being played backwards or something. It's like you hear the note at its final stage, but that like the notes, that's technically when it was supposed to be starting. It's a really neat effect, and once again, it's another unique thing this album has.
It could be some kind of like a digital type of delay effect. I don't know. It's crazy how some of that stuff works. I have an analog delay pedal, so it's very limited as to what it can do. I don't really know. Have you ever messed around with digital delay, Miles?
I mean, slightly, but not enough to like have anything profound to say about it. I guess what I think might happen here is like, I'm presuming this is all post-production stuff, so that whatever's happening was all after the effect, right? Like it's
yeah,
that
makes sense.
That's all I can say though.
It says on the Chris O'Leary blog that it's a reverse tracked treated piano. So I don't exactly know what that means, but I think it kind of makes sense for what I was hearing.
Like Miles was saying,
tracked, yeah.
Treatments usually that's afterwards, not ahead of time. Yeah. This is perfect morning drive music. I've been after I dropped Maisie off, my daughter, for the listeners, at daycare, I have a short drive to work after that, and this song gets me from her daycare to the school I work in. So it was just been perfect for my morning drives, sipping on a coffee. It's it's a good way to start your day, listening to this.
I did the same thing. I think it was like Tuesday, and I have a very short commute to work, so it took up my entire commute to work. It was like 7 minutes or whatever. A lot of these songs are like all the same, 6-7 minutes. And it was also really cool too, because when I was listening to this album just on my walk in the park, this is when it kind of started to get dark outside. And it was just perfect. Like it was just like, oh yeah, this is great. I think I posted a video to our Instagram, or a picture with like these visual effects, and it was really sweet. This is when I talk about how this album was perfect for like a fall walk. I mean, this is the song.
Well, and if it gets dark after. And then the next song comes on, it's like you're like in the Warriors, or like a gang walks around, and it's like here come the Van Cortlandt Rangers, or the whatever, the Jones Street Boys. And because it's kind of, the next one's really funky.
I was kind of worried too, because the reason I wound up going out on my walk so late was because I brought these little like dinky headphones, like the ones I'm wearing right now, and like I couldn't hear the music, so I actually had to drive back home, which luckily the park's close to where I live, but I had to go and get like my really expensive headphones, my over-ear ones, to actually hear the music. And when it was getting dark, I was kind of thinking of that, because
looking over your shoulder a bit.
Yeah, we got we have a bit of a crime problem here in Winnipeg, so I'm definitely an open target right now. I got like these $400 Audio Technica headphones, walking by myself in the dark. There weren't that many people around, but the music, I think, I was just so locked in that I went, fuck, whatever happens. And yeah,
fate to the wind.
And yeah,
you died on the hill of this being a great album, literally.
I just moved into a new apartment, and I have a very narrow back alley that I was driving out of the other day, and there was somebody just walking right in the middle of it in such a way that I couldn't drive around them. And I was like, what the fuck is this person doing? Sorry if we can't swear on the show. And then I realized, they have like headphones in. But like, have some self-awareness.
Yeah. I mean, even though I can still kind of hear, I'm looking behind my shoulder every so often, right? So that someone like you doesn't have to do what you have to do,
right? Which I had to run her over. No, I'm just kidding.
That or I was late for work. I have a headphone story kind of that leads into the next track. So I just bought winter tires for my vehicle and dropped it off at Costco to get them installed, like 2 hours before we filmed this. And I thought, okay, how am I going to get home? Like it's complicated because we've got kids at home and there's car seats to deal with. And I was just like, you know what? Costco's really close to my house. Like it's like a 5-minute drive, so I could probably walk home. And I was like, I got to walk home and do that. I was like, no, I'm going to rollerblade home. That'll cut my time in half. So I dusted off my rollerblades and put my headphones in and rollerbladed home from Costco and listened to Bleed Like a Crazed Dad. And it's such good rollerblading music. Never thought I'd say that, but yeah, you heard it here. Bleed Like a Crazed Dad. Music to rollerblade home from Costco to.
Real 1993 hours up in here. Like the only thing, like, did you play it on a Walkman? Like,
I'm imagining you with a mohawk, and I'm just getting like Halloween City or whatever, or like Diamond Dogs vibes. Like,
yeah. One of the punks, yeah. What do they call them?
God, are they?
What was that gang Halloween Jack was in? Or was he not in a gang? It was just the Hunger City Rollers or whatever they were called. I don't know.
Something like that.
The Droogs. Yeah, this is another one with that. This is the second song with that band, 3D Echo. The guitarist's name is Rob Clydesdale, and he said that when they, I guess, came to the studio, Bowie just started humming some riffs and said, "Can you record that?" And he was like, "Okay," and he did. And then Bowie was like, "Okay, thanks." And he's like, "What? And I want to do it for real now." And that was it. So kind of harking back to the Spiders, where, you know, Woody, Trevor, and Mick Ronson would just start to get the hang of a song, and then they'd look and Bowie'd be taken off, and it's like, okay, we've just cut Suffragette City, and that's what lives forever. Or Gene Genie is going to have that, you know, Boulder jumps up to B too fast, and it's in there, and that's just the way it is. He probably wanted to take that back so badly, you know.
Drive me nuts.
But as Miles, you were mentioning how raw it is. I mean, if you're if that's the guitar track that you're adding, is somebody just figuring out what he wants to do and then capturing it before he's got it in his, or right as he gets it. Yeah, it's all about that spontaneity. Yeah. It's why would go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, Jess, John, I don't know if you have much, but like we've spent some time on things like GarageBand and, you know, putting audio together, recording, arranging, and I lost my train of thought of what I was gonna say. Sorry.
Spontaneity, GarageBand.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, usually it's like the demo, you get used to the sound of like a demo recording when you first put something down.
Yeah.
That when you try to record a final version, you're like, oh, it doesn't have that same magic, you know? So
right. Yeah. When I do the outros for all these episodes, it's always, I start putting things down, like, okay, I'll fix that later. And then I just want to get a bass track down because I'm doing it by myself and I'm just overdubbing things. And then by the end of it, I'm like, good enough. You know, that's in the spirit of Bowie. Is I don't want to re-record it. And like, you know, as long as I keep the time okay, it's going to be all right. But I mean, you could spend forever trying to perfect things like Donald Fagen did for Steely Dan. And you know what's funny is I can't remember what album it was for, but you know, one of the big ones. I mean, all Steely Dan's albums are kind of big, but there was a song where something happened to the tape, like the master, and they lost the song. And Donald Fagen had spent like a month trying to perfect this song, and then he lost it all. And then he was just like, well, fuck, we can't do that again. So the song's just gone. Like there's no existence of it. It could be their best song for all we know. I mean, I think he spent a lot of time on a lot of songs, but it sounds like it would have been great. But it's like, well, if you weren't trying to perfect it for like 3 years or whatever it was, like maybe we would have got a version of that song that sufficed.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially just like modern music production is something I dislike so much because of the overuse of like auto-tune and a lot of stylistic choices. But yeah, you know, it's nice to hear an album like this, or, you know, other David Bowie albums where he is allowing, you know, authentic takes to be used, and you might hear a mistake, blah blah blah, but it has that human element. And increasingly as a musician, that's something I'm looking for more and more, and what I'm listening to, like, because the direction that pop music is going in now, like, not that it's all bad, but just like in general, stylistically, it's something that I find to be very sterile. And it's almost like another thing I heard recently was somebody comparing a lot of modern metal to being like CGI metal. Like it's just like, it is overproduced, and it's just like, I don't know, watching a Marvel movie or something. And that's fine too, but like, it's just like, that's not the movie I want to watch, or, you know, what I want to listen to.
Well, and I think it's important that you highlighted like that you don't like the sound of pop music, because, you know, but all these crazy ideas we've talked about on this album have, you know, taken place throughout all the tracks we've talked about, maybe not on the first one, but certainly on, you know, South Horizon and all the other oones. But this one is definitely more of like a conventional pop track, right? It kind of has like some of the bounce that a song on Black Tie White Noise might have had, but it is still a Buddha song because it does still capture that spontaneity a lot more. So this is kind of like South Horizon, like the pop version, right? Which I think is really cool. And also, just to piggyback off what you were talking about earlier, Jesse, that guy from 3D Echo, I can't remember his name, but what I thought was really cool is he apparently wasn't really a fan of Bowie, like at all. He didn't really care for his music, but he did say that this like recording with him left an impression on him, and like his minimal overdub approach and like just the way he worked in the studio, that kind of influenced his decision making later on. So yeah, I definitely think like the key to this record is definitely the spontaneity, and it's, I don't know, it's really good stuff.
Kind of an interesting ingredient too that kind of sparked something I read. This book, some of our listeners may have it for the YouTube watchers. This one that comes with that the Brilliant Adventures box set. There's a great interview with Erdal Kazilki in it, and he talks about having Bowie over at his house. They kind of had like a standing, like it was Tuesdays and Thursdays. He'd come over. Bowie would go over to Erdal's house and they'd record. And he was, as we've mentioned before, Bowie was one of those guys who goes through people's record collections. And he saw, some interesting stuff. He saw some typical stuff, but he didn't find any of his stuff. And he asked, he's like, why don't you have anything of mine? And Erdal said, well, if I hear you, I'll play like you, or I'll have more of an idea of what I should be doing and not what I should be doing. If that makes, you know what I mean? Like, he's like, I don't want to have any kind of preconceived ideas based on what I've heard you do in the past, even though he played on an album in the past, toured with him. But yeah, so that's kind of cool to go into it not listening to the person you're playing, or like in Clydesdale's case, not even liking Bowie, perhaps. Has he heard Low?
I feel like we should get a little bit more specifically into the track, but one final diversion I'll add is that, because I am doing this Rush podcast, I think that people don't realize how important a producer can be, and that how valuable that other voice can be to a band or an artist, where you can you can get very tired of your sound, or you're surrounded by yes men, so you don't know how to change stylistically, and sometimes you need someone who either whatever doesn't like your music normally, or just can offer a different voice, or to your music. That's a really important thing.
And I think that's a huge shift as to where Bowie is going in the early 90s versus the mid to late 80s, where he was surrounded by a bunch of yeses. It was like, who am I to tell David Bowie what to do? He just put out Serious Moonlight or Let's Dance, and I'm not gonna fuck with that formula. So now he's pushing himself a little bit by going out of his comfort zone and working with guys that aren't listening to him, or just saying, whatever you say, man.
Is this the song? Oh, go ahead, John.
No, I was just gonna say, because he interestingly enough, Bowie himself kind of reaches back on this track to a few of his earlier like styles. Like, this is definitely like a Ziggy voice kind of a song.
Yeah.
And you can maybe even look at like the so it's like the Ziggy voice, but like the African Night Flight kind of style of like rapping, like the pace of African Night Flight, but with the Ziggy voice, and then this completely different thing in the background with the music.
He does kind of rap on this one.
Mm-hmm. Is this the one that you thought the lyrics especially were kind of like nonsense? Or was that a different one?
It's still to come, but I mean, this one too. I mean, what's funny is I thought he was saying Zane, Zane, Zane again, but it's actually Shine, Shine, Shine. I looked up the lyrics to this to see if I could find anything worth mentioning, and that's all I think is worth mentioning, is that I thought it was Zane, 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 but he's Shine, Shine. I know he says that on other parts of the album, but
well, it's that Ziggy accent. I thought it was shame.
Yeah,
shame,
me too.
Shame,
me too.
Shame. Especially because you usually hear that word in a triplet. Shame, shame, shame.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And he mentions the craze, like it's kind of like a play on words, like a double entendre. Like you ever hear of those two gangsters from London, the Craze, that like ran nightclubs? Apparently he's referencing them here. Yeah, it was like these two guys that were like, one of them wound up, I think they both went away for murder or something. One pled insanity. I'm not really familiar with their story, but apparently a lot of musicians in London in like the late 60s, early 70s crossed paths with these guys. Like they were, or maybe it was just the 60s. I think they got busted in the late 60s. I don't think Bowie ran into them himself, but yeah, they ran like nightclubs. So a lot of like English musicians, you know, had contact with them. And yeah, apparently Bowie's referencing them. And even if you look at the lyrics, like a lot of the times they will spell craze with the Craze, but there's one particular passage in the song where it's spelled like Krays, like referencing these guys, these gangsters that I think Ray Davies had a song that he mentioned them in. So I thought that was kind of a neat historical tidbit that this song has.
Cool. Yeah,
that's fun. Some wordplay there. Yeah, without having that context, I feel like, you know, maybe it's just because I am a little bit more used to analyzing the lyrics of Neil Peart, which is a little bit more straightforward in terms of like what the topic is. Like I just found it very difficult to interpret what the heck a lot of this was, what it meant. But I guess we already did mention that this is an album where David Bowie wasn't necessarily going for strictly narrative songs that have like a narrative through line or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
they're definitely just sound that like astral, kestrel, fed into the featherfall, fed him on a pedestal, carving you will never get. Like,
I mean, these are the most Anthony Kiedis, Red Hot Chili Peppers vocals that David Bowie's ever done.
Yeah, I was gonna say
because he does the rapping. I mean, that's always been the thing I never cared for in the Chili Peppers. You know, I understand they're obviously this mega talented band, and John Frusciante's a machine and all the rest of it. But yeah, I never liked the rap, the nonsense rapping that Anthony
like
kind of
Dr. Seuss rap, basically.
Well, there was like an AI joke that was making the round. Somebody like AI to Chili Pepper song, and they just put fucking even more nonsensical lyrics than what he would come up with, and it kind of sounded like a Chili Pepper song.
Yeah.
Lots of California.
Yeah, that was one of the words he used. Yeah,
that's for sure.
I think this might be time to pause. I'm just looking at the track listing. So we're in the digital age now. We're 5 tracks in. There's 10 tracks on the album, and we've kind of talked about one of the ones on side B already too. So I think this is going to have to be the end of part 1, and we'll cut it here. Yeah. So there's 4 sides on the re-release of the record. So this ends side 2. Side 2 has 2 tracks on it: The Mysteries and Bleed Like a Craze. So I guess
that's probably an annoying one to own on vinyl. Because I wouldn't
get up and change it every 10 minutes. Yeah,
maybe I should buy this on CD because I wouldn't want to.
I'd recommend it. Yeah, I'd recommend
this is a
CD.
Weird side. The Mysteries, then Bleed Like a Crazed Dad, and that's all that's on the side. Is that how it works?
Yeah, ending a side on South Horizon and then starting with The Mysteries is kind of weird. I kind of want those two to go back to back. Like I wish that it would have ended at The Mysteries and then start with Bleed Like a Crazed Dad, Into Strangers When They Meet, Dead Against It, because those kind of live in the same world.
So it
probably has more to do with fitting it with a certain quality of pressing.
This must be a hair over what a record's allowed to, or how much music you can put on one record. Like this album doesn't seem like it's an hour long to me. It must be just
it's under it's I think it's like 50 to 55 minutes or something. I don't know the exact amount, but
because you're only supposed to have like
30.
Okay, yeah, because you're only supposed to have like 23 minutes on a side. So I guess they just couldn't quite do that. Like usually a record can be like 47, 48 minutes before you start running into those audio quality issues.
My pressing of Earthling has 3 sides, which is kind of cool.
Oh, and then an etched side, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I'd have to really think about it, whether it would work. I don't know. I digress.
I wonder if you could, because I know like the vinyl pressing for the last album we touched on it, like cut a few tracks, right? It was Looking for Lester and one of the wedding songs, I want to say.
The instrumental one.
The first one, yeah. Like I wonder if like maybe they could have just cut like one of the redundant Buddha title track songs. And you know, then it would be like 50 minutes. I mean, you can put it, you know, like the Rolling Stones Aftermath was the single disc, and my record doesn't sound bad. You know, it's like it's like a 50-minute album, whatever. You know, I feel like they maybe could have done that rather than making you go up and flip the disc after every 2 songs or 3 songs. I'm kind of not a fan of that. So yeah, maybe this is a CD album, a good one to own on CD. or cassette. I still have a cassette player. Remember those?
Wow, yeah, those are weird.
All right, so let's call it. That's side 1 or whatever it is, side 2, part
Record
1. Record 1, yeah. Part 1 of Buddha of Suburbia in the books. Thanks for joining us, Miles. You'll be back in a couple of minutes as we do part 2.
We'll do some time traveling.
Let's do it.
Talk to you all in a few weeks, but I will talk to you guys very shortly.
All right. I'm Jesse.
I'm John.
I'm Miles.
Thanks for listening. Let's just let it roll and go right into it, or what? Or do you need
Is this on YouTube right now?
Well, yeah, let's. Yeah. Okay. Tom Petty does this on Full Moon Fever. Attention, CD listeners. This is the part where people who buy the record or the cassette have to get up and turn it and change the side. Please pause to allow them the whatever, and then thank you. Here's side 2. So yeah, this will be our intermission that YouTube will get. We'll just, I guess when part 2 comes out, we'll just throw this out and we'll put it up on YouTube. Maybe we'll edit the part where I took off for a few minutes, and like for the actual Spotify, Apple one. For YouTube, we'll just throw it all on because I don't want to edit all that.
Yeah.
Is this streaming to YouTube right now, or is that
no? Okay. I'll just upload it because I don't know. I think I know when we posted it, a few of our listeners were like, "Oh, cool, more video, please." So
people like video.
Yeah.
So another reason why I wanted to do this on Zoom, because like Jesse invited me over, and I went, you know what? Maybe this way we get. I guess we could have just done me and you on the same camera, but
right.
I just felt like this worked for video purposes a little bit better.
Yeah, Johnny, your mic's still doing that thing every once in a while too. I would almost recommend just using it'd probably be better to not have that and just use your computer mic if that's going to be going.
I just unplugged it. How does it sound now?
You don't sound much different, to be honest. So I would just go with that.
Do that.
You might have to sit a bit closer or something, but
no, I'll be super close on the YouTube video.
Yeah. Nice clean shave, unlike Bowie on Black Tie White Noise.
I didn't, but yeah, whatever.
No. Yeah, I can still hear you pretty good. So
nice. Maybe I should get the Fantastic Voyage thing in there. I don't know.
There you go. I'm gonna go get a kombucha. I'll be right back.
Ooh.
So yeah, I'm guessing this won't make YouTube. Oh. This has been a lot of.
I don't know what to believe anymore, but I don't care. It's content. Free content. Are you a kombucha drinker?
I am not. No.
Oh, okay, yeah. I got into it in the past few months myself. It's
the best. How is it on your gut health?
I mean, I think it's better.
Yeah, I find it like. I mean, I don't notice the difference if I don't have one or anything, but it's a good report. I don't want to
yeah. Well, it might be a placebo, but like it's enough for me that I drink it and I assume that it's doing good things for my gut flora and whatnot. And
right.
Like there's ones that are like cola flavored that like I can, close my eyes and drink it and kind of go, oh, it's like I'm drinking a Coca-Cola, but it has no sugar and like it's like supposedly healthy. So it's not so bad.
Yeah. I'm having a Clear Mind Brew Doctor. Mint, rosemary, sage, and green tea.
Those are Costco ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got those before. They're good.
Yeah, they're pretty good. And the little sloth says, slow lane life. All right.
Nice. Do I have
this is for YouTube. I should give them a better view of this is a cooler little corner of the most boring spot of the whole house was what I was sitting in front of last time. So it's maybe go over here. Any Bowie on this wall? Oh yeah, there. Hey,
oh yeah,
you hear that album? That's a decent one.
There.
Oh fuck! I was gonna wear my Bowie shirt, but it's in the wash, so I wore this one.
Oh, that's good. You're plugging your thing. Here, I got Bowie in there, and
I've got
canine genitalia is making its.
I've got that.
Blocked.
That thing. So I'm matching my wall.
All too raunchy for YouTube, I think.
Hang on,
guys, you've been blocked.
All right, should we?
Sorry, I'm just scanning around. Oh, I do have a David Bowie thing. Here we go. Tell me if you guys know what that's from.
Oh, that's from The Next Day.
Yeah.
Is that what the CD thing is on the inside?
Yeah, when you unfold it. Okay, there
Well, and
we
your
go.
Union Jack is very Earthling behind you too.
Oh yeah, that was
Yeah.
intentional.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into side 2. I guess we'll have to do the whole intro thing. Where are we? Strangers when we meet. Okay. You guys ready?
Ready.
Welcome back to Fantastic Voyage, a David Bowie podcast. I'm Jesse.
I'm John.
And I'm Miles.
Yeah, we've got Miles back in the through the worldwide interweb. We're back on Zoom. Miles is in. We didn't even mention on the last one. You're in Calgary. We're in Winnipeg. That's about I don't know, about a 12-hour drive, but
something like
short
that.
flight. About 3-hour flight, not even.
About 2 hours. Yeah. Used to drive back and forth. No, well, not drive. I used to fly back and forth. Well, I didn't fly. I used to be flown back and forth. They're a lot when I was younger.
You mean you can't fly?
Believe it or not.
Yeah. So if you didn't listen to part 1, what the hell are you doing? Listen to this one, part 2. And maybe you just really like the Buddha version of Strangers When We Meet. And you want to hear what we have to say about that. But if not, go back and listen.
I think it could be argued by some people that this side is better. So I think it's conceivable.
I mean, when I was listening to this album, because I wasn't hyper familiar with it by any means. I was kind of expecting it to lose steam, because that's typically the middle of side 2. That's where like the fat of the album can be found. But no, not on this one, not at all.
Or that kind of odd structuring, like track listing.
Yeah.
It almost like, conceivably, if you're not in the mood for something a bit more experimental, it's almost like, you get the big epic opening track, and then it's like the album is already kind of like sputtering around a little bit.
Yeah, so I guess we should get into the cover, shouldn't we?
Yeah, you've got the good. I mean, the good cover is kind of plain, but I mean, it's better than a hideous cover, right?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so we're also putting this up on YouTube, so you can find us on YouTube. I think it's just Fantastic Voyage Podcast. We'll link it in the show notes. I love saying that. I always end up not doing it, but I like saying we'll put a link in the show notes, because I hear that on all the podcasts, so I say it. But yeah, on YouTube, you'll be able to see, here's the cover I've got, and this is, I think, the consensus better cover of the 2. But there was also a third cover. This was the sepia, came in 2007. It was black and white when it was first released in the, let me see, I gotta check my notes here. So yeah, this album was messed up. It was released as a soundtrack, or under soundtrack, even though it is a studio album by Arista in the UK only, back in November of 93. Didn't get released in the US until October of 95, which is after Outside came out. So you can argue that this is not the best in Scary Monsters, because Outside is in between. But in the US maybe. But anyway, the
David
new cover...
Bowie hated that, didn't he? Every time he'd release a new album, people would go, "This is the best, your best works in Scary Monsters, David Bowie."
Yeah. The new cover in the US got this cover, him sitting on a bench, but it was in black and white. And then when it was remastered in 2007, it got the sepia finish, which is, I've always associated this with that color, kind of.
Well,
because of the cover.
If you tuned into side A, I kind of mentioned how I went on a nice, beautiful fall autumn walk while I listened to this album. And the reason I wanted to do that is because when I was listening to it, I went, this is an autumn album. And I mean, I kind of associate the color brown, the leaves are turning brown. It's a brown time of year. So I'm glad that they turned the album into a brown album cover, because there's nothing really going on in the album cover. They may as well make the color, very reflective of the sounds on the record. So yeah, I'm glad. I didn't know that it was black and white when it first came out, but I'm glad they made that switch to sepia.
Here's what it looks like. The inner sleeve has the picture in black and white. And actually so Buddha of Suburbia is not underrepresented in the school library I work in. I have that picture up on the wall.
Sweet.
Bowie. So it's actually, this is such a big album. It's so heavily promoted that the kids in, in the neighborhood
they
I work in, they know all about
they
it.
obey it. It's like their master.
You wouldn't believe how many of them, they call me Mr. Jesse, and one of them, Mr. Jesse, is that you? And I'm just like, yeah, that's me. Because I started working. I started working at this school during the pandemic, like right when it started, kind of. So I was wearing a mask all the time. So they thought that was me for the longest time. And then when I stopped wearing a mask a year ago or whatever, when the mandates were lifted, they were like, oh, some of them were like, yeah, that's not you. But some of them still, the funny thing is some of them will still ask, like some of the new kids, like the kindergartens and grade ones are like, is that you? And I'm like, really? Like, no. And so I just say like, yeah, that's me. I make really good music.
Yeah, now you got to play them the music video for Heroes in
right.
and check it out. It's me. You ever hear this one?
And then move on to Moss Garden, arguably better.
Yeah, some sickos might say it is. Yeah, I don't know anybody like that.
That was a top. If there's like a fan voted top 5 moments on the podcast, that's probably one of them. Where Johnny declares Moss Garden is that you like it more than Heroes,
better than Heroes,
which is fine. Like it's like that's totally valid, but it's just like it's a funny, interesting thing to hear.
Yeah. It's just totally different type of a song too, right? Totally, it's almost hard to compare the two. But no, I definitely, and it's not even like I was trying to be like contrary and like fuck Heroes, because like Heroes is like right up there. It's like the second best Bowie song.
Right.
I just really, really like Moss Garden. Or maybe there's even, I don't know. I might, when it's all said and done, I might be like Miles. There might be a bunch of songs on this side of this album that are in my top 10. I mean,
yeah. Well, so honestly, that I think this next track we're going to talk about made my top 10.
It's kind of the same
version.
Nice.
Yeah.
Kind of the same feeling of Heroes, like different sentiments, but that same epic type of a pop song, right?
Yeah, very similar tempo, I guess. Groove of just it's, I don't know, plodding. That's maybe not the nicest way to put it, but an insistent sort of groove, mid-tempo thing going on. Yeah,
kind of melodramatic.
Yeah. This is, of course, Strangers When We Meet.
Right. So this song was an early version of this was recorded with Reeves Gabrels, with his band, The Modern Farmer, I think, or Modern Farmers or something. And imagine this, The Modern Farmers made it to Americana. It's just, I don't know, farming American music. I don't know, just kind of, I thought that was funny that it was too American, where even Reeves said, yeah, no, this is bad. We don't want to do this. I'm glad that it wasn't scrapped entirely, because wait a minute. I'm realizing I haven't even sought this out. I'm talking about it. I haven't heard it before. Have either of you heard that version of it?
No.
Okay, I got to seek that out now. We'll link
it
in the show
notes. Never reached Canada.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then of course there's that version, and then there's this version, and there's the outside version, which has all kinds of stuff done to it, re-recorded vocal and everything. It's always interesting when songs appear on different albums. Like I think of something like All You Need Is Love is on Magical Mystery Tour and Yellow Submarine. And when I'm adding a playlist, I'll sometimes grab the Yellow Submarine version, because it doesn't matter which one you do, and I just want to see the artwork for it.
That would bother me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, or the title track, Yellow Submarine, like grab the Revolver version because it's a cooler cover or whatever. But it's kind of neat. Like this one, it truly is totally different, is what I'm getting at. I'm going way off the rails there, but and yeah, that's so. Miles, you said you like this one more than the outside version.
Yeah, so I did a little bit of work comparing them earlier today, and definitely noticed some differences in the vocal melody. I think they throw in another chord in the outside version that's absent from this one. I seem to be hearing a G major or something, like a subtonic thing happening that isn't happening in the this version, as far as I can tell. And yeah, it's just that little thing. Like I watched, there's like David Bowie and his band live on Jules Holland performing this. There's a few other live recordings, videos of this song, and I think they do mostly conform to the outside version. And so it's very close, but I do just tend to like melodically what's happening a bit more in this version. The vocals are typically a bit in a higher register in this
Yeah,
one as opposed to
almost more,
outside.
almost kind of like opera-y the way he's singing. It's very like you picture him with his arms out, like Pavarotti or something.
Right, totally.
I
Which
I
yeah,
I
and then
do
you see
like
him on
this.
Jules Holland, he's wearing sunglasses and a leather jacket or whatever, and it's much more subdued, like
Yeah,
different style, different style. Yeah.
I think he did it on Leno too, didn't he?
Oh,
That might have
maybe.
been
Yeah,
around the out. That may have been more around the outside tour, but yeah.
I think it was
Um,
95. So yeah, that's when Outside is out, right? So yeah.
I think maybe the outside version, maybe what's added to it kind of takes away from the song. Like there's almost maybe there's too much going on. I kind of, I'm so used to this version now because I wasn't really accustomed to it, just listening to Outside the album a lot more than I do this one. And when you take those things away, it sounded a bit bare bones. And then today I thought, well, I better A/B them going into this episode just to know what I'm talking about a little bit. And I found this, like especially the Reeves stuff, maybe a bit unnecessary. I kind of wanted the more, I don't know, I guess you'd call it stripped. It's not stripped down because there's still a lot happening to it, but there's no Garson and there's no Reeves Gabrels on this version, and no Eno. So obviously it's not quite as busy, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, less dense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I
Well,
do prefer. I think I prefer the vocal to on this one a lot more than the next or the outside version.
yeah, it just gives it a bit more energy. Anytime that like something is just sung a little bit higher, to me, I perceive that as, and again, Rush is my favorite band, right? So that's, if it were up to
Getty,
me, David Bowie would sound like that all the time. No, I'm just kidding. But,
Well, and
Getty Bowie.
yeah,
singing it higher is kind of interesting too, because I think this is another one of those classic Bowie songs where like the music and the lyrics are almost at odds with each other, because on the surface, because of the sound of this song, it appears to be like about two lovers that kind of have no idea that either exist, and they're meeting each other, and it's this beautiful thing where they're falling in love. But the more and more you read into the lyrics of this song, this reads more like someone who was once in love that is now glad to see the ex-lover like kind of on the street and as a stranger, not as a lover, because so much time has passed that they're now completely over the person, they've forgotten about them, and they're thankful for the fact that that person now appears as a stranger, not like their ex, right? it, it's
Right.
yeah,
it's not, when you hear, like I said, the song kind of sounds almost like Heroes, but it's not as beautiful of a sentiment as Heroes. It's more of a, like, I'm
personal.
glad, yeah, I'm glad, I'm over you and I'm glad for it, and we're able to move on. So definitely not what I was expecting the song to be about. When you play it for the first time, you're kind of expecting the lyrics to be this completely different thing.
Does it change? Like, does the lyric grow a little bit? Because he says, "I'm resentful." What does he say? I'm resentful for. That's not for we're strangers when we meet. I'm resentful for something. I can't remember. I
Well, I
should
think it
quote
might
it.
be for that because I think at the end it's I'm so thankful we're
So it
strangers that
does.
we meet. But
Right.
yeah,
So his perception of how he feels towards this relationship changes from one point of the song to the next, which is really cool.
totally. Yeah, John, I think you nailed it because that's what I felt like too. Like, I guess I kind of initially perceived the lyrics as being about two current lovers and maybe a distance growing, but I think that's just part of the stew that it's like, it's almost like reminiscing on that. Because there's definitely that forget my name, but I'm over you, which does seem to indicate
Mm-hmm.
that we're referring to like past tense a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think
All
it
your regrets ride roughshod over me.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the outside version, the vocal does climb into that higher register towards the end, similar to how Heroes does, actually, because Heroes
Mm-hmm.
starts out lower and then ascends. So another similarity to that track.
Mm-hmm.
At least I think it. See, now I've listened to both of them like back to back. I might be blending the two, but I think it does take off a little bit on the outside version.
Yeah, definitely there's a nice like chord change that happens as the bridge and then kind of for the outro.
Yeah,
There's that like
yeah,
minor feel it goes into, and
so good.
there's such a longing to it, which is ironic because maybe this is like the music being at odds with the lyrics. If it's like a lyrical message of being over someone, the music kind of betrays that to me, where it feels much more longing.
But I mean, those things can coexist. It could be a sad turn, but maybe for the better, and he's got to swallow it, kind of thing.
It's bittersweet. It's a very bittersweet sounding song. Yeah.
So well done. Yeah.
And it's probably worth noting that in 1993, so the year the song came out, I don't know if it was maybe conceived a little bit earlier, but in 1993, Angie, like his ex-wife, Angie, had a book that came out. It was called Backstage Passes: Life on the Wild Side with David Bowie. Now,
I read that book, actually.
Okay, so that's interesting because I haven't read it, but I took a peek at some of like the Amazon reviews, and they claim that she kind of comes off as bitter. And no, I haven't read it, and I'm not even really interested in taking sides on the matter or to say she's wrong for the book or anything like that. She's probably right about a bunch of stuff, maybe wrong in some things, whatever. That point is kind of moot, but what I kind of wanted to highlight was that it is quite possible that David felt some type of way about it, and that it would make sense that was on his mind, and that's why he's doing this type of a song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was thinking about Angie a lot, even after their relationship ended officially. Mm-hmm. Like quite a few songs that seem to be about her in some capacity, so that's not out of left field.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is one where, we were talking about the kind of more complicated arrangement of the song Buddha of Suburbia, and this one is relatively quite simple. It's like, the 1-5-4 sort of thing that you hear in a lot of pop music, but just for whatever reason, like it's just when it goes to that one chord, the last one in each verse, kind of, it's just like, again, it like rips my heart out, and it's like not a complicated chord progression or anything, but just something there's some sort of a magic there.
Definitely probably the most powerful song, or the most powerful pop song, maybe. Yeah, one of the more powerful songs in the record for sure. Like this is, like I said, it's an epic song in the vein of Heroes, at least to my ears.
Mm-hmm. Let's not forget the second appearance of "Gimme Some Lovin'," the bass line.
Mm-hmm.
Doo-doo. It's also in Join the Gang. he like basically samples it and Join the Gang, and then on this one it's kind of more just the bass line resembles it.
Well, and also earlier you were talking about Suffragette City, and this kind of has a so
it's cool. It is neat because I think the Space Oddity motif is the most obvious one, and the Zane, but it's neat as you dig deeper into these tracks to see musical nods to the past and not just the Space Oddity one, the dun, 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 is very musical, but it's a bit more on the nose, so to speak.
Yeah. And that's where I was kind of thinking, like, maybe like the first track of this album doesn't sound like anything else on the album, other than, of course, the last song in the album, which is the same song. But thematically, but thematically, it's like a retrospective on his life. I kind of interpret that to be like the central motif of the album. That's what the title track is, kind of a retrospective on his life. And then you have all these little Easter eggs and tidbits to his past. If the song's about Angie, that would obviously be another, retrospective angle that he's approaching or taking on the approach to this song.
One lyric that stands out to me, because I'm not sure exactly what he means, but he says, "All my violence raining tears upon the sheet." And both of those, so first of all my violence is leading to these tears, which is an interesting thing. Maybe fits into Outside a bit. It could fit into that world, or it can fit into the relationship world, which I think this one definitely does. But raining tears upon the sheet. So I'm picturing Bowie either crying in bed on on his sheets, or writing the lyrics down and on the sheet of paper, and both of them are very sad pictures that I'm thinking of. Yeah. So I'm not sure which one that is, but no matter which one I picture, it's both very sad. Oh, poor David. He's crying. He's crying in bed alone, but or while writing these lyrics on this paper, they're soaked in his tears.
Or conversely, if he is in fact responding to Angie's book, that could be like, poor Angie, like, my violence is raining tears upon the sheet. He didn't say my sheets, the sheets. True.
That's
is
right.
that his, violence being like kind of this metaphor for his past actions or whatever. They were with, not that he was ever, I don't think, ever violent with her, but violent in a metaphoric sense, and then it having impact on his past lover, leading to her crying.
Right.
And it fits into outside, if you're cutting somebody up on the bed for the purpose of art, and they're crying on the bed sheet as they get wrapped in it.
Wait, what the fuck is that? That's good. Outside is a funky one.
Yeah. All right. This can't win Tumble and Twirl because it's too big, but damn, is it a good one, hey?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this better be on your top of the era list, or I'll be pissed.
I think as a guest on this show, for this episode or for this season, you should have a pick. We should give you an honorary pick.
Okay.
So
I guess it's this one.
It's probably going to make it anyway. You could maybe, so take that as you will. Pick this one or pick a different one.
Okay, sweet.
Oh, I wasn't gonna pick this. I want an extra pick now.
Yeah. But will I pick the outside version?
All right.
Yeah,
it's all good right. Enough.
Not named after, but no relation to the Kirk Douglas film, for the film buffs out there, Strangers When We Meet. I think I was
wondering about that.
A 50s thing. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that was a pretty big movie. All right, let's get on to Dead Against It. Miles, was this one of the ones that was in your top? I can't remember. I feel like it was one of the ones that you said was like a top Bowie song for you. Let's start it off with a bang.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I kept going back and forth between this one and Strangers When We Meet. Like, okay. And talk about like listening to this album for the first time and kind of, it's like really like the first track, and then it's like, holy crap, like 4 or 5 of these really, experimental kind of songs. And then I get these 2 really like melodic, kind of more pop typical kind of songs. And, it's a lot of things. Like, I feel like it's a bit of my own imprint of like, I listened to this album when I was like back home from my trip, and I had a certain feeling of like, I had a new lust for life or whatnot. And it just felt like these songs in particular just captured the feelings that I had really well, even if, lyrically or whatever, I have no idea if that was the case, or I didn't at that point. And
well, it's funny you say that. I wrote down, like, I'm trying to describe the mood of this song, and I just wrote down triumphant. It's a very like on top of the world feeling.
Totally.
That's about the only way I could describe it. Is it feels like something's been accomplished, or like it's or like something's been accomplished, but maybe it's even like you could do more. Like it's inspirational almost. Like it's very upbeat.
Yeah, it's like super poppy. Yeah.
It's kind of going back to that. This is almost like the companion piece to the mystery, or the mysteries, or whatever it's called, where he's, like this suburban kid's in his room dreaming, and now this is almost like he enters the city now. He was wondering about it, and now he's entering, this suburban kid who's never seen the bright lights before is overwhelmed by like maybe the vibrance and the possibilities of the city, because this is a very vibrant song.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think too, like you guys were mentioning, like the lyrics, I mean, on a lot of songs on this album, but this one in particular, like the narrative or the wordplay, it's very inconsequential. Like the music is what is overpowering. Your mind will, and I'm sure every listener will attest, when you play this song in particular, your mind will just evoke images or maybe memories or just things other than what's being said, right? Your brain's not really thinking, oh, what was that line? Like, you're not even worried about that. You're just like, holy shit, this is such a, I mean, for whatever reason, the image that came into my mind was like, I think it's in Super Mario Kart, like that Rainbow Road drive level.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
No, I like to think of this song as being like an audio kaleidoscope, like especially that kind of keyboard part right before the verses. That like, it might do some stereo panning, but either way, it's
I'm circling this, Johnny, for the YouTube viewers. Look what I wrote on this one.
I saw your eyes light up.
Bonus level and a video game.
Wow.
It feels like you're Rainbow Road and Mario Kart is perfect, but I was also thinking like, in Mario where you find a pipe that takes you to something, and or more, it's maybe more of like a Sonic game actually, where like you're collecting the rings and you're going like super fast and trying to it's like it's that level. You got to just try to get as many rings as possible in 1 minute, and you're going through, and it's all good. You can't die here.
What's that star level in Super Mario World where you get like the purple Yoshis and all that?
Oh yeah, Cloud City, or what's that called? Star. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Star or something.
Special something.
Well, was that the special world where there's like Mondo and Far Out?
Yeah, that's it.
I think so. Yeah.
90s slang that has since died a violent death.
Yeah.
Also, you gotta love a good Modric beat usage. Like the good old classic. Like this sounds like something you'd hear on like a Noi record or one of those, like an older krautrock band. So once again, kind of like going back to his past influences a little bit. Like he used those beats on a couple of the songs on Lodger.
So you mentioned Noi, and past influences. So in the liner notes, he says here, my personal memory stock for this album was made up from an almighty plethora of influences and reminiscences from the 1970s. Here below is just a tiny selection of what went through my mind while writing. If you want to pause it on YouTube, there it is. Noi is listed here.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
No way.
So yeah, no way.
No way, mate. That's for the Australian fans.
Yeah. Oh god, another tumble and twirl candidate. Out there.
Well, and this is another one where even if the lyrics are a bit inconsequential, the way they sound is very appealing. Like especially early on, you get the really good God, oh my, I cry and die and lie beside. Like it just sounds so good, but much better than how I just said it. Imagine when David Bowie singing that in your ears. It's much better.
It is, because there's also like later in that verse, it's like hope eloped a rope a dope or something. If you were reading it, it would look like ridiculous, but you never think it's ridiculous when you're listening to it, right?
No. And he has a very breathy kind of quality to his singing on this song.
Yes. I was gonna say it's very soft, it's very comforting. And like I'm trying to think of what he's saying. It's she does this or she does that. So he's kind of describing the way a woman acts or how she's doing something. I don't know exactly what he's saying, but I don't know. It's all very warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, the lyrics to me, like again, kind of tried my best to interpret them. It does seem to be about a woman. She talked to God. I think that's an important line. And when she's dreaming, I believe. When she's reading, I retreat. I kind of imagine that as like dreaming of like the better things that Christianity can offer, but then like reading the Bible and like something about that maybe, and she's dead against it. That could just be like, when you're following a religious dogma, you tend to have a very strict set of rules that you follow, sort of thing. So that was the best I could do for interpretation, but it is a bit hard to crack.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. Yeah, dead against it, not just against it. It's like no, it's there's this and there's that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost like whoever this person is, she'd like to talk to. It's like, I'm guessing it's his lover, but she loves to talk into the phone, no matter who, no matter when. It's almost like she would prefer the company of strangers to assuming it's David Bowie is this person she's in there. It's almost like he's annoyed with her. She's not as into him as he is her. At least kind of how I read into the few lyrical passages I can remember.
Yeah.
And when she's reading, I retreat. Maybe they're just at odds. Maybe this is like the companion piece to Strangers When We Meet.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
And I definitely am for this being the tumble and twirl pick. We can maybe even just go ahead and make it that right now. I don't know. I mean, like I was mentioning a little bit earlier in this episode, like I was this song in particular, because this is like one of the middle tracks on the side, right? This is kind of, or maybe no, it's like the second song. Well, whatever it is, this is kind of where I'm expecting it to maybe lose steam, but no, like this is like probably the best song, or arguably the best song in the album. So yeah, definitely a tumble and twirl vote from me.
The next one is no slouch either. I had this
would be the other one,
as a possible one, contender. So Without a Name, Untitled, number 1. That is the name. This was the one.
The song you were talking about where
the lyrics, I don't know what he's saying, sleepy papu or sleepy kapoo. Like what? I don't know what it is, but it's been in my head for 2 weeks and I don't even know what I'm saying. And like people like I've been singing it around. Like, what are you saying? I don't know. It just sounds cool, which is what Bowie was going for.
I looked it up today. Finally, it's Shimmy Kapoor. Apparently, according to what Google's bringing up, I searched it up and an actor came up, but it's a different name. Yeah, so
Shami Kapoor, which was an Indian actor, which is interesting. Although I can't remember if it's the book where the protagonist is Pakistani, and in the film he's Indian, or the other way around. I can't remember, but that could have been where he must have been looking into Indian film, maybe found that name and then changed it to sound like what he wanted it to sound like for the album. So yeah, I think you're onto something there. I think that's definitely where that comes from. I was looking up in one of the books trying to figure out the lyrics, and one of them suggested sleepy capo. like a guitar capo. I was like, I don't know about that. I meant sleepy capo. Like,
I saw one person float out cynical fool, which I don't think. I mean, it doesn't seem like something he would actually say, but it kind of sounds like it, like cynical fool. But no, it's not. It's I think it is that actor's name. The only note I had written down for this song is a Number 9 Dream.
Oh, totally.
Because not only is it called Untitled Number 1, but that refrain is just like the John Lennon song. Where what's he say on Number 9 Dream?
Well, I think he's
pussy, pussy. So it's kind of like the same thing. It's like this made up language, made up phrase is like the refrain of the song. And also it kind of has that similar dreamy soundscape that John Lennon would use. I mean, Bowie he made it no secret that he was a fan of John Lennon and not Paul McCartney. So I don't know, maybe he even had Number 9 Dream on the brain when he did this. I can't say for sure, but it's definitely more in his wheelhouse, that that type of a song.
That's interesting that there's another, like I was thinking of Revolution Number 9 initially when you guys brought that up, but there's another 9 themed John Lennon involved song.
That's right.
Yeah, it was his birthday was the 9th, so it was like a special number. There's a bunch of other reasons why Number 9 was special to him.
Okay.
But yeah, it comes up a lot in his writing.
And we filled the quota for the part 2 episode. Every episode we have to mention Lennon.
Oh, you mentioned Yellow Submarine and All You Need Is Love like 5 minutes in, didn't you?
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah. I think I probably.
We have to each mention it twice. I've never had an earworm that I had no idea what I was saying for so long. But yeah, very upbeat, very much Number 9 Dream. I hadn't thought of that until you mentioned that, Johnny, and totally in the same, like sonically and thematically then with the lyric. And I love that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I love that.
We're both being too polite. No, you go. You actually had something more important to say, I think.
Maybe. I was just going to go on to, there's this ascending, I'm trying to picture what the instrument is, but the do. I think it's a synth maybe. And that just kind of like floating in and out throughout gives it that, I don't know, you can't be anything but happy when you listen to this. It's releasing. I don't know. It's such a good feel. I just love this one. Miles, this is the one where when I texted you setting up when we're going to do this, I said, oh, there's one song that just like popped out of nowhere where it's one of my favorite Bowie songs now. I mean, I say that all the time, but this is like the biggest climber for me, mainly because I didn't listen to it really until now. And it's like, holy crap, I've been missing out on this for some time now.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were talking about it before, right? It's like we're on side 2 now. We're getting to like the end of the album. It's definitely tucked away, pretty hidden on one of the most hidden David Bowie albums in his catalog. So yeah,
not an appetizing title either. It's called Untitled.
For sure.
So you're not like, because sometimes that might be the reason someone might randomly reach for a song. Oh, this looks cool. It's got a cool title. No, this is called Untitled Number 1. I mean, what
Well, I guess the alternative was calling it Shimmy Kapoor or something.
Yeah. Going back to past influences, how about Mark Bolan and those vocal inflections on the Shimmy Kapoor, where he kind of does that,
especially towards the end.
Yeah.
Kapoor, yeah.
Mhm.
So so we're going all the way back to what's Unwashed
Black
and Slightly
Country Rock.
or Black Country Rock, yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you mean.
We're digging deep for these Easter eggs.
For the people to do it, though.
Yeah,
we're here for the job.
Mm-hmm.
All right, yeah, this might be my tumble and twirl pick. Recency bias because it's so fresh in my discovery process, but Dead Against It I listened to a lot when you mentioned that to me years ago that this is one of your favorite. That was one of your favorites, but yeah. Oh boy, it's gonna be fun picking it's gonna be difficult picking tumble and twirl for this one.
This is the tumble and twirl album.
And then the funny thing is we'll forget to do it before the episode ends.
Well, what's the era cutoff for this album? Like when you guys rank like the best of the era?
I think we're just going to do the 90s for this one. There's 5 albums, which is tough, but we did it for the Ziggy era. So I think we can do it for this. Albeit that we picked one from Pinups. But I mean, we might just have to extend it to be like the top 20 from the era or something.
We did that for Ziggy, right? I think we made the Ziggy era a little bit bigger. Did we do 20 tracks for that? Or was it 18 or something?
I think it was 20.
It might have been.
But Miles, I'm not sure if you're aware, the Tumble and Twirl's separate from that. We've been doing a Tumble and Twirl award, which is a song that embodies it's hard to explain. It's kind of like so it was inspired by Tumble and Twirl, the song on Tonight, where we were just like, this song is just hidden and not bad after all. It's maybe not the best on the album, but it's one that we think deserves recognition. Kind of like a deep cut. So we pick one per album now and just call it the Tumble and Twirl pick. Like Shake It on Let's Dance was the one we picked, where the pick is like maybe 3/4 true and 1/4 tongue-in-cheek almost. I mean, maybe not that much tongue-in-cheek, but like 1/10 tongue-in-cheek, where it's like, this is the best song on the album, Shake It. And it's like, I kind of mean it, but I kind of obviously I'm not serious. Yeah,
I mean, to me, the song on this album for me that fits that is Bleed Like a Craze, I'd say, because it grooves so hard, but it is like a little kitschy and cheesy at the same time that I simultaneously love. And there's that 10% of like, I mean, this is a bit cheeseball, but whatever. Anyway, that'd be my vote. So just take that as you will. But we're not there yet.
All right, so let's get to Ian Fish, UK Air. Now, this one for my note, I put Meanwhile at the Black Lodge because that's a Twin Peaks reference. It's just like right when you think you got this album's mood figured out, this pops up. You know, we've got these kind of like Strangers When We Meet has some resolve to it. Dead Against It is you're on top of the world. Untitled #1, you're still kind of floating on cloud 9. And then this is like, nope, like you got a demon chasing you or something. Like, slowly walking. It's like what's that movie?
It Follows.
It Follows, yeah. And what a name to the song too. Ian Fish, UK Air, which is an anagram for Hanif Kureishi, which is I think the author of the book Buddha of Suburbia.
So
that's where the title comes from. Although Ian Fish sounds like a Monty Python character, does he not? Like Ken Shabby's friend Ian Fish enters the room. You know, it's Terry Jones or something.
Famous fish
Ron Obvious.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. He's definitely married to a fish.
You know, it's funny because you mentioned that this is kind of a scarier song, and I'm not going to like argue and say that there's no way to like read into that soundscape. Like you can definitely, you know, there's some eerie moments in this, but I never particularly felt this song like scared me. Like to me, it's kind of harkened back more to that like loving life for all it has to give thing. And maybe that's just because I played this album on that beautiful nature walk, and you just got to be in nature when you play this album and you appreciate it so much. But, you know, I think like because this is an ambient piece. I don't even like calling it a piece. It is. I do think of this as a song. It's an ambient song, and I think like all great ambient songs, like it's a meditative piece, right? You're supposed to meditate, and it's meant to evoke something out of you while you get lost in thought, and it's music to think to and music to contemplate or to reminisce or think of the future, just wherever your brain's taking you in that moment, wherever your brain is spontaneously, right, taking you in that moment. So I've always kind of found this to be a little bit maybe more on like the beautiful side, or maybe not even beautiful is the right word to describe, but more on like the contemplation side. It's one of those songs that really just makes you get lost in your thought.
Yeah, this one to me isn't too stylistically different than the Mysteries. It's a little
Right.
bit more abstract, I guess. But yeah, I kind of see both sides of it. To me, this is like it is kind of I think there's some major key stuff going on there, so that it's not necessarily directly evil sounding, but it does sound like the kind of new age music that my dad would listen to, and it makes me it's like I'm in another dimension or like between life and death. It's kind of or it's like a very meditative song, right? Like it's just like a place in my mind that I don't go to very often, and it's unfamiliar and kind of unnerving for me in that way, even if it's like musically not directly super scary. It's just like something about it does feel otherworldly in a way that is a bit uncomfortable for me, actually.
Maybe the best way to explain it would be it's kind of like the bridge between Sense of Doubt and Moss Garden.
For sure. Yeah.
Because it shares sensibilities with both.
I think it's almost the bridge between both of those songs and Brilliant Adventure, which comes on Hours, because I think I get the same kind of feel on Brilliant Adventure as this, especially with the classical guitar and the kind of feeling of a contemplation, as you were saying, John. The chords I think are slowed down Buddha of Suburbia chords.
Yeah, the acoustic you can hear is plucking the melody line of
the melody.
Yeah,
and I think that it shifts. Like you notice the chord change significantly when it gets to the like the Down on My Knees in Suburbia. It really goes down, but it's powerful because of how kind of sludging the tempo is on this song.
Which is why I made a point of calling this a song, not just like, oh, this is an ambient piece. No, this is very much like a song, in my opinion, because of that.
And I think what adds to that, the ambience is that phaser that's just going on throughout in the background. It's just kind of there through, kind of similar to in Weeping Wall. It's not the same, but it's that same kind of. It's just there. It's present throughout the entire track.
Kind of a suppressive force that's always there, at least to me,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's where I went to It Follows on Weeping Wall, and I go there again here because of that ambience. And then it's between to me, this is a bridge between the instrumentals in Berlin and Brilliant Adventure, which is a great song too.
Weeping Wall is a good one to bring up too, because that was influenced by Steve Reich, who was like, it was a minimalist song, right? Like, and this is like, I thought maybe that was Bowie's most minimalist song, but no, it's this.
And
this
also adding in
got.
melody. That one adds in Scarborough Fair, which is a well-known song, and this one adds a song. This is the third time this song is on the album, or well, the second time, but it's this. There's three versions of Buddha of Suburbia on this album, and this is one of them.
Got as much mileage out of that as he could.
Yeah.
Does this song get paired with something? Remember, this was in Moon Age Daydream, the movie.
Yeah, it is.
Does it get mixed with Moss Garden? Does that happen? Because that soundtrack, remember. I kind of want to maybe even do an episode on that soundtrack. I mean,
we will when we get there. We'll have to.
Yeah, because like there's some interesting, and I think this album's similar to that Moon Age Daydream soundtrack, because this album, we've talked about all the odes to the past. I mean, Bowie does that a lot, but this album seems to have a lot of specific, like actual literal odes to the past, and you kind of get a blending of ideas. That Moon Age Daydream soundtrack is really cool for like, oh yeah, this song pairs really well with that one, and they get faded into each other and stuff like that. It's a really, really cool soundtrack. And I do remember this being on there and thinking, oh, that's a really cool pick, because that was a critique a lot of people had of the movie in general, was it didn't have a lot of later career Bowie stuff in it. But I definitely remember this being one of the ones that got used. Maybe one of the only ones from other than like his more popular albums from the 90s. This was maybe one of the only deep cuts that got used, but for good reason. I mean, this is another good Tumble and Twirl. Like I said, this is the Tumble and Twirl album. There's so many candidates. I mean, there's like 7 choices that I don't think I could be upset with.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't think there's anything objectively bad about this song, but just the way it's like right near the end of the album, it's very it can test your patience if you're not in the mindset for it.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Probably not my favorite, but it's probably just because of where it's placed more than anything. But it is.
Well, it almost feels like I kind of went back and forth on what I thought should follow this song up on the album, like what should be like the last song. And to your point, I know you talked in the first episode about how you maybe wanted to be sequenced a little bit better. And like to me, like the follow up to the song, it maybe could have been something more like a song like Brian Eno's Taking Tiger Mountain, like something a little bit like, because this song you're almost like floating into the abyss, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's kind of a hard right or a hard left turn when we get to the Buddha reprise, whatever you want to call it. But then I think I also kind of learned to appreciate that because the Buddha reprise to me is it's almost like it's like the credits rolling in a movie.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
I kind of learned to appreciate the end sequence a little bit more as I listened to the album a few more times.
I feel very similarly. Like I've learned to appreciate the sequencing now, even though I think for the layman or for somebody just jumping into this album, it's really weird and it doesn't flow necessarily super easily. But yeah, in my relisting, I actually removed one of the Buddha of Suburbias, just because I feel like it's a bit redundant. But I decided to end the album with Ian Fish UK Air for a similar reason, that it's almost like I could see them as being like an end credit sort of thing as well. It's laid back.
Let's hear your if you were to rearrange it, what do you've got it?
Oh, I thought you'd never ask. Okay, so it's complicated because again, like I feel like it's an album that really only has a handful of like typical songs, and then even then, one of them's repeated, and so it's hard. But my intention with album sequencing, anytime I'm thinking about it, is kind of try to maintain a momentum at the start of the album, but then like have some consistent ebbs and flows. So this is what I came up with. We start with Buddha of Suburbia. We go into Untitled #1 next, because I also like that song, and more people should hear it. And it's also like sing-songy enough. It's experimental, but it's like not as jarring as I feel like going straight into Sex and the Church.
Better for a track too. I agree.
Yeah,
I think so. That said, I put Sex and the Church next. Then we get into Bleed Like a Crazed Dad. And now we go into South Horizon, Dead Against It, The Mysteries, Strangers When We Meet, and then the credits, Ian UK Fish Hair.
I like that. I think the only difference that's really good. I think I would switch Strangers When We Meet would be the end, and then kind of pull you back out and into the resolve and give you a bit of closure, maybe. Although I don't like closure in art, really. I kind of like, like that's kind of when you don't talk about it as much as when there's an open ending, you're kind of like, that's when you start talking to people being like, hey, what did you think this,
Right.
Well, I think Crazed Dad going into South Horizon is how you had it.
Yes, I think so.
The 2 Garson tracks, I like that because
that's cool. Yeah,
the more conventional pop Garson track, and then
the mysteries.
you get into like the weirder one, right? Then you get into it's the same pianist doing his same spontaneous, total freestyle, total improv, but I feel like it makes more sense to have maybe the pop version of that first, because that'll hook the listener before South Horizon will, right?
Right.
And now that you're kind of getting that flavor of improv, now you're getting the much more kind of weirder or unconventional piece. I think that does make sense sequence wise.
Yeah, great. I guess I'm just looking at it now too, and I'm a child of the '90s, and I grew up buying CDs, and so I think as a CD order, this works quite well. I hadn't considered it as like how I would approach a side 1 and a side 2. That I'd maybe even reconsider this further. But for now, I'll say this would be maybe a better album if it was ordered that way. Maybe not, but more palatable, we'll say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we got to talk about the Lenny version a little bit, right? I don't really have much to say other than it's rocky.
Like, I don't like hate it or anything. I've noticed, that it is kind of this low hanging fruit for like, especially for, because like David Bowie fans they tend to be music fans that are into more like critically acclaimed music, and Lenny Kravitz doesn't really fall into that bucket. So I think like naturally it was going to get some hate because it's like it's Lenny Kravitz. He like I think of him as that guy that did the annoying cover version of American Woman. Probably a lot of people think of him that way, right? But
especially from Winnipeg.
Maybe if we didn't know he was on it, maybe if we were a little bit like blind to that, because like to me when I first heard it, I was just like I didn't really care that he was on it. I didn't really pay attention to that. And I'm just like, oh, like maybe if we said it was John Doe playing that guitar, the perception might change. But I do think there is something though to the idea that he maybe overplayed it a little bit. It's maybe a little too Guitar Hero-y, and I don't know. But to me, it's pretty. I find it to be an inoffensive close into the album. I look at it as just like, oh yeah, this is it's the intro getting repeated. It's the reprise. It's, everything's coming full circle. It's almost like a movie. Okay, we're getting, the credits are rolling.
You know what? It's No Game all over again in Scary Monsters.
Yeah. Right. But like the Disney version where they get whoever's hot at the time to do a version of the big song in the movie at the end, like Celine Dion or something doing Beauty and the Beast through the end credits. Yeah. Or somebody in Frozen does it, like Demi Lovato or something does a version of Let It Go where it's like, okay, let's get something for the kids now to get into it, or the people that are into the top 40, like let's give them a version. So it's kind of like that. And that was very of the time, like in the 90s they were doing, like, this is just speaking from Disney. I've got a 3.5-year-old at home, if you can't tell.
What's really a shame is, we keep talking about all these threads to the past that can be found on this album, the Easter eggs, and this just popped into my head. The last collaboration we got with Ronson and Bowie was kind of lackluster, right? What was it?
It was very lackluster.
Can you imagine if it was him playing the outro on this? How fitting that would have, more of a fitting end that would have been to their relationship had he been able to kick around for this. Maybe Bowie would have even asked for him, who knows? But that could have been really special, if Ronson closed this off, a very cinematic and bittersweet ending, like, what could have been.
And also to bounce off of that, I just felt like it'd be appropriate to say that we were talking so much about like allusions to his past, but we should also maybe, note that this is obviously very representative of the future direction that David Bowie is going in with these more electronic elements and whatnot. And to be honest, kind of the previous era before this, some of the mid-late 80s stuff is a blind spot for me in the David Bowie discography. So I don't know Black Tie, White Noise very much. So I don't know how stylistically similar or dissimilar it is to this album. But in my head canon, David Bowie certainly sings the praises of Buddha of Suburbia and probably rekindled some creative spark, in him. And I feel like this did inform a lot of his 90s work. And so it's a pretty important album for the direction that he went into the 90s, which was his second great decade, apparently.
Yeah, I think the way I see it in terms of Buddha transitioning into this, Black Tie White Noise transitioning into this, was it's almost like he worked on Black Tie White Noise, he puts it out and he goes, okay, now I can't wait to get home and put all these ideas back to work and keep going. You know how like you get excited about something and then you can't wait to just like get back at it like right away. And he did get back at it right away and put this together really quickly. And it's almost like, I think Black Tie White Noise was the last step to get to this place of doing things raw, like we talked about in the early one, like getting was it Clydesdale to play the guitar, and then as soon as he figured it out, he's like, nope, we've got it already, like get out of here, your services are no longer needed. And putting things together with basically him and Kazilke in a room and David Richards doing some producing and Mike Garson, like there aren't many players on this album, and it's very quick, it's very spontaneous, and it feels like he was so excited to get to be working in this manner again, and this is what we get out of it. And I think it is I mean, it's here we go. I think you can still say best since Scary Monsters, because I think it is a step up from the last album in terms of the process and his excitement, his passion maybe is back. I think maybe during Black Tie he was a little bit, I don't know if he was I mean, he just got married. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but this one seemed like he was just like, I want to be in a room making music again. And it comes out, there's a bit more, it's hard to say passion, because I think it was there on Black Tie White Noise too, but it just, I don't know, there's something more, there's more emotion on this one, I think.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at in the first episode, where he's kind of just blocking the outside world. He does Black Tie, like
yeah, exactly.
He doesn't go and tour it. He goes and makes an album right away, and he doesn't tour this one either, does he?
No,
right?
Yeah.
He's just kind of making music and with no audience in mind. And like I said, I think it provided like a very organic and retrospective view in his life by doing that. He's just kind of just thinking about himself and his life and music. But like Miles was saying, I also think it's kind of like one eye to the future also. Like he's living life in the moment and just doing what comes to his mind immediately. And yeah, I think it was the best creative move for him to just kind of focus on this stuff, and not go out on the road, not do the music video. There's only one music video, right? He didn't do 3 or 4 music videos for this. He's not worried about promoting it. It didn't even come out in the US, for God's sake. He's just kind of making music. And I think, it's definitely the healthiest segue, and probably the healthiest segue into his more acclaimed albums in the 90s. And you can kind of see why he was heading in that more critically acclaimed direction again. I think this is the reason. He kind of found the formula in 1993. If
you think of it as Bowie's rebirth in the 90s, if Black Tie White Noise is the debut, this is the follow-up, and then Outside is album 3. I think Jimmy Iovine said he liked working with artists when they're on number 3, because it's kind of like you're really hitting the sweet spot with writing and with your creativity and everything like that. And I feel like it kind of makes sense, where it's just interesting anyway to look at it as from a rebirth of sorts in his solo career. This is number 2 kind of this new David Bowie, the second half, or the third maybe starts now. I don't know. We talked with old buddy Mike Garson about how Bowie put together 3 separate Hall of Fame worthy careers, and this one's kind of the beginning maybe of the last one. Anyway,
let's try to point to number 3, Fear of Music, best Talking Heads album.
Yeah.
Number 3, right?
That's number 3, yeah. To close out the Buddha Lenny Kravitz version, we put out a poll on Twitter, whatever the hell it's called, X, and pick a version, the original or rock. So to show how much people are into Buddha of Suburbia, we only got 28 votes, so not many votes on this one, but the original one, 75% picked the original and 25 picked the rock version, so pretty swayed towards the original. But that's actually more for the Lenny one than I thought would get. I thought it'd be totally.
Well, we were talking earlier about the notion of somebody just hearing the first track on this album and then maybe skipping the rest. Like, the Spotify numbers don't lie. The Buddha of Suburbia, the first track, is at like just about 4 million plays, and then the rest of the songs are in the hundreds of thousands. They don't even reach 1 million.
Wow.
So there you go.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. We should bring that into the show more. That's really cool to see how much things are streamed.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing a bit of a shake-up on my show with that sort of thing too. Like the battle of the bad songs or something. Yeah.
All right, I guess we should get into the mailbag segment, shouldn't we? We're probably going over because we're on Zoom. I can't see the runtime that we usually do because we're just recording into this. So like we could be at like, I don't know how many hours now. If you combine both. Go ahead, John.
Sorry. I just wanted to show off I still have Twitter. It's not X. I haven't updated the app yet.
Oh, nice.
What is this? October 2023. I'm very proud of that.
Let it be known.
I have Twitter, not X.
All right.
X.
Johnny, what one do you want to start with?
Well, I was just pulling it up here.
Are we what platform we've got? So yeah, for our mailbag segment, you can find us on X. we may as well just say that now. At Bowie Podcast. And about a week before each episode, we put out a call to read out what you think of the albums, and we like to read it out on the show to hear what you have to say. And we usually give a little commentary on it as well. We're also on Instagram now as well, just in case Twitter implodes. And actually I'm kind of, well, you're having fun with some of the posts on there, aren't you, Johnny? We're trying to beef up that content now because it's a lot more, I don't know, stable, I guess. So yeah, you can find us at Instagram at Bowie Podcast as well. Should we start there on that one?
Yeah, sure. Let's start at Instagram. I'll read the top comment here from Weird and Gilly. One of his best albums. Lousy cover on the original version. The lack of promotion by the record label was shocking. Strangers When We Meet, one of the best songs he ever wrote. So Miles agrees with that for sure. Yeah. And yeah, it is. I mean, but I feel like we say this about like so many songs. One of the best. He's got so many of them. Like when we do the top one, we do the top one because Miles says this is in his top 10, and I'm like, I don't know if it'll be in my top 10, but what is there that big of a gap between song number 10 and song number 90?
That's just it.
Right?
That's just it.
Is there that? I mean, there's going to be a sizable one, but it's not night and day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like when you try to make room for these ones, it's like, okay, so what from Ziggy and Heroes and Station to Station are you cutting for this? Like, you can't cut Word on a Wing for this, can you? No, I don't think. Like, I don't know. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
It's hard because I'm sure you guys understand. Like, I love. We already talked about it. I love making lists, and in particular, I like to make very subjective, personalized lists.
Right.
Like, there's obviously like you could do like the Rolling Stone David Bowie top 10 songs, and like, no, I would not put Strangers When We Meet there. Like,
right.
But for me, fuck yeah, man! Like, it absolutely is in the top 10,
and that's the fun of it.
List.
Yeah.
Moss Garden's not making Rolling Stone's top 10, but it might be Fantastic Voyages.
Yeah, it could be the top 5.
Yeah, top 1, as some sicko once said.
All right. Next comment is, I guess we can announce this now. So Teenage Waitress is going to be our guest on the Outside episode coming up next. We'll have more on that later. So he says, this one was the holy grail Bowie album for me for a long time. Couldn't find it anywhere in the 90s. So that's interesting. Although I believe he's from Southampton, so that's even interesting that it was hard to find in the UK. Near impossible to find in the US or here in Canada. And we had 4 music shops in Southampton. Ended up ordering it from a public library on the other side of the country. Lost my shit when the little card came through the post a few weeks later to say it landed at the library. Great album. Another very positive step forward from Black Tie, White Noise. Dead Against It and Untitled No. 1 are outstanding. And The Mysteries is a lovely throwback to the side B of Low. Also love Sex in the Church. Don't know if you guys have ever heard David Lynch's albums, but I imagine he's a fan of that one too. Yeah, I have listened to some David Lynch. What's that one? There's this one, Today's a Good Day or something. I had that in my head for the longest time a couple of years ago. Miles, I bet have you listened to Lynch's music?
No, I haven't yet.
Oh, it's a hoot. It's exactly what you'd expect it to be. It's 90s Bowie, but with like David Lynch singing. He gets singers most of the time too, but sometimes you get a vocal from him and it's like, yeah.
I think I had just watched a little bit of his last movie, which I'm blanking on what it's called right now, but it was shot on like webcams. Inland
Empire. Yeah.
That's a very experimental film. And
it's long, yeah.
And weird. And I tried watching it, and that was the first film of his where I ever went like, I think I'm going to stop watching this right now. And then I like shortly after that watched an interview about him regarding his music career, and he said something like, I take the guitar and I put the neck face down, and then I put my fingers on the tone knobs, and like it's just like, oh man, I can't deal with this. I don't want to. But I'm in a good
and it's mood. Sunny here in Los Angeles and 80 degrees every single day. It's Friday.
Yeah. It's worth a revisit.
I'll read the next comment here from Ramona66, who says, love the instrumentals and near instrumentals best. The Mysteries and Ian Fish UK Air especially. Perfect listening on headphones in that liminal space between waking and dreaming. So reminiscent of the instrumentals of the Berlin period I can imagine Bowie using this album to woo Brian Eno for the next project. I found a lot of this stuff to be spot on, and especially that perfect listening on headphones and that liminal space between waking and dreaming, because I believe Miles said it, UK Fish Air reminded him of that place between living and dying. Yeah. Right. So these instrumentals are really kind of hard to pinpoint. And what I found with these instrumentals, it's, I'm reading all these blogs about the instrumentals and what went into the music. And to me, it's like, that's like a fool's errand. Like those pieces are kind of more meant for the blog posts on those songs should be about your personal experiences almost. Like, you almost shouldn't be talking about David Bowie. You should be talking about you. Like that seems to be like the point of those songs, at least to me. And definitely we mentioned the Brian Eno thing too. This is definitely the stepping stone towards working back with Brian Eno. It's like, there's some near oblique strategies being used on this album. It's definitely in Eno's wheelhouse. So yeah, agreed with every word of that post.
Okay, let's see. I don't know if we're gonna be able to get through all of these today. We'll do our best. So Ogden 12. This album is very fall to me. It's a late October, November staple. Yeah, perfect. That's when we're recording it. That's when, Johnny, you went on your walk. I went for my rollerblade. Oh, by the way, on my rollerblading, as soon as I was done Dead Against It, it was straight to, or Bleed Like a Craze. I put Dead Against It on afterwards, and I felt like Sonic going down the street. Right? It was just like, yeah. I had to, cars be damned. I'm going straight through. I don't care. Look out.
Perfect.
Okay, where was I? My favorite track is Sex in the Church for sure. It reminds me a bit of Palace Athena from Black Tie White Noise, which is my favorite track on that album. Yeah, it's definitely a connection there. This album doesn't get as much recognition as it deserves, but that goes to say for pretty much all of his work in the 90s. Yeah, relatively speaking.
But this one especially, right? Like this one,
yeah, it's the lost album. It's a lost, yeah. It's like Sam France when he made his lost albums. This is Bowie's lost album.
Sam France, the most underrated indie outfit of the ever.
Yeah.
The ever.
Yeah, feel free to jump if you want to say it. If you have any comments on these two, Miles, jump in.
Yep.
Not putting it on the spot.
I think everyone's just articulate and correct so far.
Yeah,
so I don't feel like I need to add anything.
What I'm loving about this, and similar with the Black Tie White Noise mailbag, was everything's just so positive. There weren't that couldn't be said for the 80s ones. But these ones are all, despite being, kind of hidden gems, the listeners definitely dig them, which is awesome to hear. I love hearing people talk about these albums that are so good that don't get talked about because, well, they're being talked about. There's a conundrum for
well, they're like strange enough that it's like, if you're a big enough fan to seek these albums out, there's probably a good chance that you're going to give them the attention they need. You know
right?
What I mean?
Yeah.
I'll also just say too, back to your point about Sam France, any David Bowie fan should listen to Foxygen because he channels David Bowie quite a bit. Go listen to Upon a Hill from the album Hang. Kind of sounds like Scott Walker too. He's definitely from the school of David Bowie's vocal inflections. Also, Crying in Heaven, Sam France. That song on YouTube. I think I showed that to you recently, Jesse. That's the best song he ever wrote from one of his lost albums.
Yeah.
It's thankfully on YouTube because most of that album's been taken off the internet. But yeah, we're digressing here. Maybe we'll do a Sam France show after.
Friend of the pod, Justin, says, I love the album, but lost it and was never able to replace it. So Justin lost it.
He needs it for Christmas too.
Yeah.
If I find it, maybe I'll get it for him.
Okay.
We have a good one here. We're all related. We've got a good one here from Rustagram67, who says, I'll start with all the songs between the first and the last. Good to see him experimenting again, but the underground club pieces are not quite as good as Palace Athena. The ambient songs not as good as Berlin era B-sides, and the avant-garde jazz piece, though enjoyable, is not as addictive as Looking for Lester or as fascinating as Sue 20 years later. Untitled number 1 is probably my favorite of all these. If the two songs with a conventional structure, I've Got to Say Strangers When We Meet, is kind of a masterpiece in its own way, what an amazing snapshot of late middle-age angst is that. As beautiful as it is jaw-droppingly disturbing. Again, he proves what insight he has into the darker sides of life and a unique ability to depict it so poetically. That's kind of, I love the darker, like I kind of mentioned that when we were talking about that song, he's tapping into the darker side of love. Like, oh, I'm glad that 15 years have passed and you're a stranger to me now. And just the way to depict it poetically and so catchily, or if that's even a word, it's just brilliant. Bowie could do that like no other. Rustagram also adds, forgot one thing. The intro to Bleed Like a Crazed Dad is so freaking good until the vocal kicks in. Reminds me of what you, this would be Jesse, reminds me of what you said about the intro to Because You're Young.
No, yeah,
it's like
it's the best intro ever, and you expect the best song ever to follow. That's actually an interesting comparison. I think I like the intro to Because You're Young more, but I like Bleed Like a Craze more as a whole, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I will also say, I mean, I do like Bleed Like a Crazed Dad, but the reason why I like a lot of the songs in this album better is the voice is kind of, it could be a little annoying. Shine, shine, shine. You know, like that's, you know,
I get that.
It's a good song still. I wouldn't, you know, but it's not my favorite, probably for that reason. So I can somewhat agree with that sentiment.
That was a great comment. Very interesting, kind of stacking it up to like the best of the best with Bowie. Like when you're talking ambient instrumentals, like you go to Berlin and it's like, well, that's what makes me a Bowie fan. So these, they fall a little bit short, but like he says, nice to have him experimenting again. I mean, the jazz piece, I mean, Looking for Lester is one of my favorites on that album. But I think South Horizon is awesome too. Like I think I like that a bit more even. So that's more subjective maybe. And same with Pallas Athena. Yeah, Pallas Athena has that menacing darkness to it. That's like I said, I think it feels like it's music to be murdered by type stuff, as where Sex in the Church is maybe a bit more controversial, taboo, I don't know, hypocrisy. Like there's all kinds of things going through your head, not just like what the fuck's going on, am I gonna get stabbed at this party or something? I don't know. But yeah, anyway, I that was a great job of comparing that to the best of the best. It was cool. Do you have any more on Instagram, John, that we
Gregson Love says, oh, I love this album, but of course it's kind of a lost treasure. And for me, because it's a soundtrack, it reminds me of I'm Breathless, an album by Madonna. It doesn't count as her album because it was titled a soundtrack, but all the songs were sung by her and there's Vogue on it. And I was always mad about it not being her official album, and most people don't pay attention to it. Here it's the same. But Buddha is a great album and very quintessential 90s Bowie. And I think if I'd want to introduce somebody young to David Bowie, Buddha is one of the albums I can choose for it because it sounds fresh and it's entertaining and very Bowie. So
that's interesting.
My top 5. There's a couple interesting things there. I was looking at this and I was wondering if I could think of another similar Madonna soundtrack type thing. Like, is there another album that's kind of lost in the mix of the soundtrack?
Oh, I was just thinking in terms of sound. Oh, because it's a soundtrack. You know what? I think that's kind of, I mean, maybe in terms of marketing, coming from the camp of the artist, it might make a difference, but it almost feels like a cheap excuse because like, you know, Purple Rain is a soundtrack album.
But it's a Prince album. It's considered a classic, one of the best albums.
Right. So, I mean, even, and this one, yeah. So it's like, that didn't get in anybody's way of it officially being a soundtrack album, or like Elvis Presley, like half of his albums were soundtracks technically. I mean, things were different in the 60s, but yeah, I don't know if it's, I mean, I feel like if the album got the marketing, even if it was a soundtrack, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. That's interesting.
I was trying to think. I was kind of drawing a blank. I was thinking if I can think of a similar example, but this might be unique to Buddha and the Madonna record. But and obviously the other interesting point there is that you'd actually pick this, because we always talk about these albums or hidden gems of Bowie's that are in Bowie's catalog, and we think like, oh, I love it, but I'm not going to show it to somebody for their first time listening to David Bowie. But here we're actually getting Buddha picked as that. And I never really thought of it in that vein, but I mean, yeah, why wouldn't you play this for somebody young? I mean, Untitled #1, and what's the other really good song right about Dead Against It? Like, those are pretty good, catchy, modern, fresh sounding songs. Yeah, why not play those first? Like think of the, like, you know, the obvious pick is like, oh, you show them like Ziggy and Aladdin same, but what's the 20-year-old going to be into? Are they going to be into Watch That Man, or are they going to be into Dead Against It? I think they would prefer to hear Dead Against It or Entitled Number One.
Yeah.
Suffragette City, that's very time-stamped compared to Untitled Number One.
Yeah.
Good points. Yeah, totally. Okay, should we switch over? Or are there any more? Fine Bomb. I don't rank it very high in the official canon personally, but since DB is my favorite musical artist of all time, I'm so glad my dude did a record like this, surprising us with such an electric and different type of album such as Buddha, and not just making the normal or expected type of vocal rock pop record, is what makes it so exciting to be a Bowie fan. What a treasure to listen to this discography. It just gives never-ending source of joy. Yeah, we've talked lots about adding another flavor to the recipe. It's just like, if you want jazz, if you want ambient, if you want this type of jazz, if you want this type of ambient, there's, you know, reach no further than to Mr. Bowie. It's just, yeah, I love how it feels like his life's work was just like, not picking everything, but like, you know, I think about Country Bus Stop, and he's even like, you know what, I'm even going to do a country song, you know, with the Sales Brothers. Like, so it's there if you want it. It's like he's kind of just like filling all the puzzle pieces. Like, and he has this, like, I'd love to just, he must have had like this map in his head of like what I want to accomplish, and how he said in Moon Age Daydream, I never waste a day. It's just like, I believe it, because he was filling his work, like his life, his library of what he had to offer with so many different things, and not just beating something to death. And yeah, always reaching for something new to add a new color. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree with, and that's why he's one of my favorites, or like my favorite, I guess.
Yeah. He not only has a, oh, sorry, I'll just say, yeah.
No, go ahead. I was literally going to skip to the next thing. So yeah, dude, go ahead.
Yeah. It's just that he has a very illustrious, colorful, you know, career, ever changing. And, you know, as we said before, always maintaining that human element too, that doesn't keep it sounding sterile, or like, oh, this is an album that sounds like it was made by an old man. Like, even if it was, like, it's like, I mean, spoilers, but Black Star is like phenomenal, and that was written by a dying old man. But like, the music betrays that. Like, it's so fresh and exciting, you know, and not overproduced. Like, it's produced, but not, you know, I maybe there is auto-tune on David's vocals, but it's not in a way that you would like notice, which I notice in a lot of other stuff. But yeah.
That kind of segues into this Twitter comment quite well from K8, who goes by that goddess AJ, who says, I remember the first time I listened to the title track, I was expecting something epic after the opening guitar. When I was disappointed, I turned it off and refused to listen to the whole album. That we'd mentioned that as being the case for a lot of people, you know, and sure enough, we have an example here. We'll need to revisit it for the podcast timeline. And the reason that I can kind of tie this into Black Star is that, I mean, I was sort of the same way. I mean, when I listened to David Bowie's 90s stuff for the first time a long time ago, like, I kind of missed and wanted the warmth of the 70s records. You know, I was fairly close-minded in that regard. And the thing with Bowie too is, for people like me who grew up with a dad who grew up in the 60s and 70s, and then turned into a contemporary music fan in my early 20s and started listening to new stuff, is that it's very easy for albums like Buddha to get lost in the mix, because his 70s albums will be what you grew up on, and they can kind of exist in that space of appreciation. And then his modern stuff, like especially Black Star, that was as cutting edge as the stuff that some of his more modern contemporaries at the time were putting out. You know, you think of like the fucking stuff that Death Grips was putting out, like Bowie's stuff was as cutting edge. So, you know, he's a really weird artist in that sense, where like like a lot of legacy artists, they don't sound cutting edge when they're a dying old man.
Yeah,
right?
Just maintaining that edge throughout.
But like I said, I think for people, I'm not sure if that goddess AJ is also in their 20s, but for someone like me, it was kind of like Bowie's in the 70s and he's in the 2010s, and there was like this huge blind spot in between. And Buddha was one of them, which sucks, because I really, really love this album now, and I wasted years of my life neglecting it.
Okay, so we've got, let's see here. We're on Twitter now. M Brabs. The 90s was when he really began self-referencing. You've been around and changes, yeah. And the title track here was a smorgasbord of references, one of his great singles that went missing. Yep. There's more. Had zero promotion, was listed as a soundtrack. Amazed to find it was a proper album. So I think, yeah, as you listen to this more, you're kind of like, oh, wait a minute, this is not junk. Or this is a studio album, and there's kind of like is there a concept to it almost? Like it doesn't feel like a bunch of stuff thrown together, at least. Marketing disaster, so it doesn't feature outside of fans' thoughts. Even original cover was still from TV show. At least Eno was listening. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Eno was listening.
I will try to find another one for us here. We have a few. We have Oyvind1970, who is Oyvind Johansson, who says, I, of course, bought this when it came out, but never really liked it. The songs go on for too long, and most of the ideas are just not good enough. The best one can say about this is that it probably made Eno, once again, want to work with Bowie again. The title track is very good, though.
Nice to finally hear a dissenting opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, the title track is really good. Where would you guys place the title track in terms of favorites on the album?
Probably somewhere in the middle. I think I go with like Dead Against It and Untitled number 1, and then like then the ambient pieces, and like then Buddha, I think, is where I think that's kind of where my rankings are. Although I've never really thought about it. I don't know.
Yeah,
but about there, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. There's songs on here that I like more, but it's like high middle ranking for me, I guess. Like it, but my instinct says it'd be at number 4.
Yeah, around there for me. Yeah, it's somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think that's probably for me too. High middle.
Yeah,
comfortably. Yeah. All right.
And the one thing I will say, I mean, a difference of opinion, I suppose, but I mean, so that just might be a matter of that, but that does seem to pop up a lot. Like this idea that the ideas on the instrumentals weren't good. And I think where I was able to appreciate them is that I was kind of talking about earlier, I think those songs aren't necessarily ideas in themselves. They're songs that are kind of supposed to be a springboard for your own ideas, right? Like there's not like as many earworms in there or ideas, or whatever you want to call them, like a typical song would have. That's where I think you're kind of almost left to fill in the blanks by yourself. So at least that's why I was able to appreciate those songs maybe a lot more, as I was kind of able to do that, or at least that's where my brain took me when I played those songs.
Yeah, it's just kind of more like abstract art. Those ones, you know,
just meditate and figure it out yourself. Because Bowie doesn't really have ideas on those, other than he's trying to make you come up with your own ideas. At least that's my reading of it.
I don't have problem with the length of the instrumentals either. I think once you get into it, or like once I got into it, I wasn't going, oh, I'd like this to end now. I think that was the case for me earlier in my, like 10 years ago.
Yeah, same.
Listening. Yeah.
It's like you look at them and you're like, oh my God, another weird instrumental, and it's over 7 minutes long. Like,
yeah.
Oh, holy shit. But then if you are in the mood for it and you listen to it, it definitely goes by.
Well, and I feel that way about Low too, right? Like there's times where I don't want to listen to side B of Low or side or some of the instrumentals on Heroes, and it's like, but I'm not going to judge it based on my current mood. It's like, because when it's there and I want to reach for it, it's A+, like it's 10 out of 10, right?
Totally.
So yeah. Chris Walker, the title track could have sat alongside Loving the Alien and Absolute Beginners to make a killer EP. That's an interesting grouping. That's Loving the Aliens 10 years prior, or 9. While some tracks sound like the rhythm preset on the keyboard has been used. And we get a sense of what the instrumental tracks from Low and Heroes would have sounded like with 90s equipment. Okay, so David Richards, is it? Yeah, David Richards, as opposed to Visconti and Eno treating the instrumentals. I mean, yeah, maybe some of the piano tones. I mean, remember Garson's story about he played an old like Casio like cheap piano on Bring Me the Disco King, and like you get that kind of cheesy sound and everything. Like I think the '90s production sounds okay though. I don't take issue with it.
I think it's a strange thing where we are kind of like, again, children of the 90s, and there's something inherently dated about 90s stuff for me just because I can directly associate it with my childhood. And
Yeah, yeah.
stuff from the 80s, 70s, 60s, it's like another dimension almost. Like, so they are dated, but not in a way that I could feel viscerally in a way that 90s stuff can. That said, I don't think it's bad, like, but it's definitely a style. Like I was saying, like Björk, U2, like so many
Yeah.
artists around this time were kind of starting to do music like this. Early, yeah, 90s kind of digital sounding stuff. And I think it's
Well,
quite charming.
and I don't think it suffers in the same way that film does in the 90s, because there's an interesting shift in the late 80s into the 90s in film where effects went from prosthetics and practical effects into computer generated effects. So it's all digital now. And if you think about the arc of the improvements upon practical effects, when you get to the 70s and 80s, it was like peaking, and some of the, like, you could do so much practically, and then it's like, oh, but now we can do it with a computer, but it starts over again, and it gets to be it's just shit, like you see some of it and it's like it ate. So some of those 90s movies that could have been great, I mean, there's outliers like Jurassic Park and stuff like that, but for every Jurassic Park there's there's Freddy Krueger's head exploding in a really shitty computer generated way, as where if it would have been done by Tom Savini in the 80s with a prosthetic, it would have looked better, because that had evolved and it was like at the top of its game. And it's like, oh, now we got to learn how to use this computer program where you can, add a chair to the room or something. It's like, whoa, look at that chair. That wasn't there before. And it's like, it all seems so elementary almost, as where I think in music, it's more subjective because it's sound, as opposed to seeing something that just doesn't look real. Sound isn't realistic or not realistic. It's just sound, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think the only argument I'd make against that is when we're getting into like the sort of auto-tune stuff. And there is some like processing done to vocals on this album. Like there's a vocoder thing on Sex in the Church, and it's like a stylistic choice. Right. But yeah, I think that like for whatever limitations in technology there was for this album, like relative to now, I think that it also, what works in its favor is that the technology wasn't there to allow it to be overproduced. Like there wasn't at least a prevalence in like auto-tune. And again, I'm just like, I really hate auto-tune, guys. I'm sorry. But like that's a thing that I don't hear in this. Like there's a lot of ways that as a digital album of the 90s, but maybe more so in the present, an album can be very overproduced. And this, we were saying it's still raw despite using like kind of newer tech, which I think works in its favor.
Right. I think the speed in which it was made had a lot to do with that. It was made in like a week, and then it was mixed over, I think they said a couple of weeks. Like it was made, I think it was maybe 15 days of mixing, I read somewhere, but and treated, I guess. But yeah, that's still relatively quick to put, that's 10 songs or 9 or however you want to look at it. Like, that's only a couple days per song. And assuming they're not working around the clock too, right? They're not young whippersnappers anymore.
The auto-tune thing is interesting because I've never hated the use of it, like in theory. Like I just look at it as like it's a tool at your disposal. See, a lot of people, they don't like the fact that it's not authentic, right? And they'll tell you like, oh, like they sounds good on the record, but like they'll never be able to recreate that live. And like I've never really had a problem with that, because I'm just like, well, a lot of the best stuff, like the Beatles in the 60s couldn't do their best albums live. They weren't capable of doing that.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I've never hated it, like I said, like in principle, I should say. But then with that said, I probably agree with you on 90 to 95% of its usage. I also don't like it, right? It's like the principle of it, I have no issue with, but the sound sometimes is, there was a really rough period there in hip hop in the late 2000s where it was just too much. It's just,
right. And I think there's another kind of theory going around where, people even say, like, this is going to be a bit counter to what we were positing earlier, but some people say, like, oh, CGI actually used to look so much better in movies like Jurassic Park and blah, blah, blah. Like, why does it look worse now? And it's this idea that it is like, yeah, oh my God, we could like reshoot this scene because we need a chair in it, or we can just digitally add this chair really quickly, like, but we need it right now. And like, but the whole movie just ends up becoming CGI that like goes through these revisions, needs to be put together over and over again, and it just gets boiled down. Yeah,
it's over ambitious.
Spontaneity.
Yeah,
do the Buddha thing instead. The Buddha Suburbia thing.
And maybe over ambitious with the CG stuff too, where it's like, hey, we can do the whole thing CG, so let's do it
for the sake of it. Yeah.
Right. But so I guess my point is that it's like, oh God, I just lost it again. Like, I don't have an issue with auto-tuned vocals, and they've been used since the 90s, and a lot of the times people don't notice them. But I actually think in modern music, it's that CGI thing where like I'm noticing, like, love the Chili Peppers, but I'm hearing some weird vocal blips on their new albums that are slipping through, like on mixing and mastering.
Black Summer.
And it's like, how is this getting missed, and how does nobody else care? But that's,
and then we go and we listen to him sing it, and it's like, why didn't he just lay that down?
Totally.
It would have been,
it's like,
it would have been really great. Yeah.
Is it worth it if it was like a few cents sharp or flat? Like,
right. That's where the art is to me. It's like, it's happy accidents or whatever Bob Ross used to say. Yeah.
Totally.
Miles, this comment is for you. So Eladio says, absolutely love Strangers When We Meet, Dead Against It, Untitled #1, and Ian Fish UK Air. The album could have ended just right there.
Hey,
that would have made a perfect segue. Would have made a perfect segue into the next studio album. Oh, and I prefer this version of Strangers When We Meet.
Fuck yeah.
Are we sure Miles isn't Eladio?
Yeah, is that you?
Have you ever seen Eladio and Miles in the same room?
Eladio is an anagram for I'm Miles.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a strong, great opinion you have there, Eladio.
This is a really good one from Jesse Hure, I think it's Aure. I don't know. We'll say Jesse. Jesse says, and I think this is really interesting. I find it so interesting that Bowie brought back the backbone of Never Let Me Down, producer David Richards, and multi-instrumentalist Erdal Kizilke. Is that how you say it?
Kizilke, I think. From the great collaborator for Too Dizzy, the album, the song that erased from the
Well, and that's kind of the point that Jesse's making here. He says it seems that in the early 90s, he was intent on reconnecting with collaborators on albums he dismissed, while in the 70s, he was quick to dismiss collaborators on well-regarded projects. Anyway, I love Buddha. It's tied with Outside for my fave 90s album. Untitled #1 makes all my introductory Bowie playlist. So once again, cool. Another introductory, like that song is being picked as the introductory song. I think that's really cool. And I find that interesting too. You know, in the 70s, Bowie was on a roll. He was like, we got another #1 album. I'm on top of the world, and I'm going to fucking just can everybody and do the next thing. And yeah, then in the 80s, he's bringing back all the people that were on his so-called dud albums. So yeah, tough to maybe get into Bowie's mind as to why he was doing that. But yeah, very interesting point, because it seems to be backwards. But that's Bowie for you, I suppose.
All right. Do we have any more?
There's a few, but I feel like we're running.
We're probably running late.
Yeah.
We don't
went
have
on that auto-tune segment there for. The Rolling Stones used auto-tune on one of their latest singles too. Very weird. Wasn't a fan of it.
Let's get to this last one. Itai Shemesh, longtime commenter, a hard one to swallow, especially the instrumental ones. Sex in the Church is an instrumental to me. Yeah, we agreed with that. But after listening to it enough, I'm sure that Buddha and Strangers is some of his best songs. And every time I listen to the album, it's stuck with me for the next few days. Yeah, I'd say just... I'm assuming a hard one to swallow, especially the instrumental ones, maybe like a lot of meat to chew on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there's a lot to dive into there. And yeah, I mean, it took me till like a couple of weeks ago to maybe fully appreciate this album. I remember when I first got the album and put the record on, it still didn't grow. It was really just diving into it. Like it's all I've really been listening to over the past 2-3 weeks, and it took that to get me into it. And I'm really, really glad I did, because it's just ascending way up my list. So yeah, Sex and the Church is an instrumental. I agree.
It's definitely a grower, not a shower album.
Yeah. All right, let's do our tumble and twirl pick. First of all, thanks for all the comments. We love reading those out. We love hearing. We love getting a feel for what the Bowie community online thinks about these albums as we embark on this fantastic voyage through his discography. Tumble and twirl pick. I had written down that I think my pick was going to be Untitled #1. But after talking about it, I'm kind of leaning towards Dead Against It. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I'm leaning Dead Against It myself. Because I think they're all similarly obscure, and Dead Against It's just my favorite. So that's my logic there.
I'd be okay with that one. I kind of made an argument earlier for, to me, Bleed Like a Crazed Dad fitting the criteria of the award a little bit more to me personally, but I really like Dead Against It, and I'm cool with giving it some shine.
Okay, I think that's 1 full for Dead Against It and 2 splits with both of them being Dead Against It as one of them. So I feel like neither of us are dead against it being Dead Against It. So let's just
good night, folks.
Wait a minute. Oh, I gotta run to my drum kit here and do the badum tis now.
But Bleed Like a Crazed Dad will appear in the outro, which I laid down the bass and the electronic drums. One of our listeners isn't going to like it, but based on the Twitter comment. But Miles, you're going to put some guitar on it, because I ran out of time, and Miles is the greatest guitar player in the room, on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. So
we're all we're in different rooms, it should be noted.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to hear what you do with that.
Well, this is one of the few times I can say I'm talking to Miles and I'm simultaneously the best guitar player in the room.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
I get to say that too often because there's no one else in the room. So yeah, this is a first.
Enjoy it while you can. I'm coming over.
And you left your toque the last time you were here. I got to get that back to you somehow.
Yeah, it's getting cold, so I need it now.
Yeah, I'll run it over. I'll see you in a week.
I appreciate it. Well, this was very fun, guys.
Before we go, where does this album rank for you in your Bowie top whatever list?
Well, that's hard. I should have made that before this and actually ranked it, but I feel comfortable placing it like just in the upper middle, probably.
Okay, that's pretty high.
Yeah, no, and I feel good about that. You know, there's obvious classic albums that are above it, like the Berlin Trilogy and whatnot, but I mean, I like it more than typically the 80s stuff. I like it more than most of the other 90s stuff, and it's about as good as a lot of the 2000s stuff in my ears. So yeah, it's nice, like upper middle. It's the perfect cult, hidden gem album for sure.
Upper middle class suburb Buddha.
Right.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Oh my god, I was dying to make comparisons to Subdivisions and the whole album Signals by Rush this whole time as we're talking about Suburbia and those themes, but I bit my tongue until right now.
And yeah, if you're ever listening to Rush, check out Miles's podcast, Anthems. I'm just getting into Rush, and I went hard like on your podcast and listening to their stuff for the first like 10 albums. And I listened to them all, and it was a great companion if you're just getting into the band, or if you're into them already. Why not listen to a podcast about it? But yeah, Signals, that was the first one that I really dove into, and I don't know if it's just like there's that part to it that I like about it. But that's been my favorite Rush album, I think.
I recently did make a tier list of theirs, and that day Signals was #1 for me. So there
Nice.
you go.
Oh wow, sweet. I didn't. Yeah, nice. All right. I guess that's it. I have no idea how long this episode went. It's 10 p.m. here. We started at like, oh no, it shouldn't be too long, but we're going to put this on YouTube. So for the YouTube listeners or viewers, this is, if you're still here listening, that's incredible.
No comment.
We'll be back next time. We don't have a tour. We don't have a movie. We are back with another album. That's 3 albums back to back. And we're going to have another musician on our show, Teenage Waitress, who sent us a great little blurb about his story with Outside. And we got to have you on the show to talk about this. So that'll be exciting. Until then, take care. Have a happy Halloween. It's perfect spooky season listen to Outside. So get into that
perfectly. Yeah,
we did time that perfectly. Yeah, so that'll probably come out like early November as Halloween wraps up. I'm gonna be watching too many movies to record that, but yeah. Anyway, I digress once again. That's the name of this podcast. I'm Jesse.
Yeah, I'm John.
Miles, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. This was very fun.
Yeah, we'll have you on again for another album. I think we've got you penciled in for another one that you've ranked high in your list too, but we'll save the suspense or what that'll be for now. Okay.
Right.
Thanks for listening, guys. All right. I guess I could stop recording now and we can.
You may.
Yeah, no.